Okay, I'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order.
Thank you.
Folks, we're going to get underway. The time being 7:02, we'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order, and we'll start with a roll call. Go around the room first, this way. Quasi.
Yeah.
Greg.
Here.
Peggy.
Here.
Alan.
Here.
Lindsay.
Here.
John.
Here.
Chris.
Here.
Eric, I'm here. On the phone, Amrith.
I'm here.
Suresh.
I'm here.
Okay. And Kathy.
Can't do this.
Not here.
Yeah, you can. But I have to wait.
Is that Kathy?
No,
Okay.
someone else.
Folks on the line, could you mute your phones? Or mute your line? Kathy's not here. Parasha, not here. Dee,
Not here.
not here. Lois, not here. Okay, so we have a quorum. The first order of business, we may come back to this, is the draft warrant article on publication of Finance Committee guidelines. Lois took the lead in drafting this. She's not present tonight. The moderator had said she was going to try to call in for the first few minutes of the meeting. I don't see her on the line.
No, she's on there.
She is on the
I'm
line.
here.
She is on the line. Okay.
She's in the car, yeah.
Are you able to speak, Carmen?
So my understanding is that this was the Finance Committee's desire to change the policy to give the committee the flexibility to either promulgate a single guideline or multiple guidelines. And the draft looks fine to me. My suggestion was that the committee consider making this an amendment to the Finance Committee bylaw instead of making it yet another policy which isn't cataloged anywhere and is hard to find. But that is, of course, within the discretion of the committee.
The proposal is for a warrant article or a bylaw change.
I'm sorry?
The proposal is for a warrant article to a bylaw change, adding a new section.
Exactly.
Okay. So discussion on two fronts, on the wording of the article and on the process that the moderator just described. Chris.
Yeah, so it looks like we would be the first group sort of having something on in front of the town with respect to changing the way budgets are displayed or approved. So that just strikes me as a little odd. If the town is going to go down that path, I mean, I guess I get it from one sense, because if the town did decide in '25 that they wanted to do that, and we felt that our bylaw was an impediment, this gets us out of that problem because we'll have cleared it ahead of time, and it doesn't require us to do anything one way or the other. But it does introduce the topic before there's been any discussion on it elsewhere, and I just wonder what that will, how the town will respond to that, if that will then be, draw us into a conversation on this. It's a strange request, right, to say, well, just in case we do this, and nothing to see here, let's have this flexibility. I think it's a strange sequence of events, and so that's my question for us to think about. Do we want to be the front edge here? Because you'll become it. It's a chance that becomes the discussion, not our bylaw change.
Greg.
Yeah, similar to that too, right? We're automatically saying go to a single number when we don't know what the town's going to do in the end. So I totally agree with you of doing that. And when I don't think we need to do this, because we could publish 3 of the exact same numbers and achieve the same goal that we want to today, right? to Chris's point, we don't know what the town's gonna do, so why are we?
Right.
Why are we saying, hey, let's do this when the town's not even yet sure what they're gonna do? So I agree with Chris.
Yeah, but just, I mean, we didn't have a conversation as a committee, so I don't know, Lindsay, if you know more. I mean, we didn't talk about it, right? All of a sudden, it appeared in our mail. So I don't know what the impetus of it is. Do you? Okay, and Lois isn't here, so I don't know. I guess I need more understanding of what's the benefit of this.
Just because we said that we're gonna do one number, as a result, is that how this came out?
I don't think so. I assume it's because in the event that the town did decide to do that in the future, this would avoid an impediment that's in place because of the wording in the bylaw. I don't know. So I think Parashar might need to talk to us more about it. Does that make sense? I don't know, Eric, do you know more about it?
Yeah, I don't know much more than that. I mean, my understanding is that this would just give us the future flexibility
Yeah.
if we decided to go down that road, given the conversations we had. I know the select board talked about this a bit and the school committee. But yeah, maybe we should table this until we have more
I
information.
think so. Yeah, I think so.
I see what flexibility it gives us, though, right? Because I said we can publish the same 3 numbers as a unified number anyway, so it's actually limiting us.
Well, I think if the town actually, it might be technical, but I think if the town actually only had one warrant article, I assume they might say, well, then why wouldn't you have one guideline? So I don't know, Greg. I'm thinking that's where it is. I don't know. So I think we just need more understanding of why it's being proposed.
So from a schedule standpoint, I noticed that the draft warrant articles are due to the moderator tomorrow, December 15th. The warrant closes January 4th or 6th,
or
something like that.
yeah.
So if we want to, and our next meeting is after that, so I guess I would recommend that we talk about this and think about it for the coming year, and think if we want to do it, put it on the warrant next year, because I agree, we really haven't
We haven't really done anything.
thought
Yeah.
about it. And there's no chance at this point in the schedule.
Yeah. I mean, if Lois comes on later, maybe she can
Yeah.
fill us in, right? But otherwise, I would say move along.
Okay, Amrith, I see you have your hand up.
So similar to what was said before, but my question is this. Do we want a policy like this which appears to be more restrictive than what we had before? In a sense, what's wrong in just taking the policy as we had and making it a warrant or making it a part of the bylaw? Because the policy which we have today, which says, Finance Committee shall annually establish budget guidelines for the next fiscal year for the 3 named entities and will publish this on the town website no later than 5 weeks. Now we're going in and explicitly tying ourselves down to it may be a percentage, it may be in absolute dollars. I can't think of any reason why we wouldn't do one of those two, but hey, a couple of years ago, we didn't think we were going to have different guidelines for different parts of the town either. So I'm similar to what was said earlier. I think we need a little bit more discussion about this, and I don't know about the optics either.
Okay, so given the time constraint that Peggy flagged, can we leave it as a draft for the warrant with the, just a question on the process, we'd have the opportunity to withdraw it if we decide not to move forward with it after this future
You would,
discussion?
I assume, yeah.
Yeah.
This would be a question for the moderator, whether she's open to having a draft at this point, if we would be changing it later.
You're on mute.
Carmen, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. The draft deadline is less important than the warrant closure deadline. So if you want to talk about this more for one meeting and get your draft article in before the warrant closes on January 3rd, that's fine.
We don't have another meeting.
We don't have the meeting. I'm sorry.
Draft, once you submit it, is probably going to go in the warrant unless you tell the select board you don't want it in there. The warrant will go to the printer on January 24th. You don't have to move the article if you don't want to, and you certainly can tweak it a little bit once the warrant is published. And you also can change the language between the time you submit the article and the time the warrant goes to the printer. So between January 3rd and January 24th, that's a period during which you can you'd basically have a placeholder in there, and you could change the language up until the time the warrant goes to the printer.
So Eric, if we have that flexibility, I would propose that we remove the last sentence of the article as proposed. The last sentence being, the guidelines may be expressed either as a percentage change from the prior year budget or in absolute dollars. Take the policy as we have it right now, make that the draft article that is sufficiently wide. We can restrict it within the four corners of that wide statement on town meeting floor and move that if we so desire, or not move it at all. But since we don't have a meeting before the date that before the warrant closes, and we potentially want to get something on the town meeting agenda, I propose we just take the policy and slap it in there.
So just turn the policy into a bylaw.
The policy is broader than the bylaw as proposed, therefore I would take the policy, slap it into the warrant, and then restrict it on town meeting floor after we've had a conversation, or not move it at all. That way we have a place on the town meeting agenda, and we can restrict it, we can never expand it.
I don't know. I don't know that I'm comfortable with that approach, Amrith. We haven't talked about it, right? So I don't feel comfortable saying we're going to put it in the warrant. I think we really need to have a conversation with Lois and Parashar.
So to push back a little bit on that, if
Yeah.
we do have the conversation after it goes to the warrant, we can still decide we are going to propose no action. We're going to not move the article.
Yeah, and we still have time. Our next meeting is January 18th, which is ahead of the cutoff that the moderator just described. So given how crowded our agenda is tonight, I would suggest we leave it as is and plan to pick back up on it on the 18th.
But like, leave it as is, meaning we don't submit it, where are we with this? I'm not even comfortable submitting it, because 10 people here don't know anything about it, and that's like the finance committee gives us something.
If I might, I think you do have to make a decision tonight whether or not you're going to submit this article before, or an article before the warrant closes. Because the warrant will be closed by the time of your next meeting on January 18th. So that will be too late to submit the article. It wouldn't be too late to amend, massage the language of your article if you already have it in, but you would have to have it in already.
That's my point. We're at a deadline and none of us know anything about this.
Yeah.
Right, 10 people, at least 10 people don't.
Colin.
I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and put this proposed bylaw in the warrant, remove that last sentence, because we still have, which is removing the words, the guidelines may be expressed as either a percentage change from the prior year budgets or in absolute dollars. Remove that sentence, put it in the warrant. We still have chance to put it on our January 18 agenda, make that the focus of our discussion, and then decide at that point whether to pull it or not. Now, Carmen, do you know when the select board is scheduled to look at, to approve what's going on the warrant? What date? I've forgotten.
I'm sorry, ask that question one more time.
When will the select board decide what goes on the warrant? What's the date?
Well, they'll determine the order of the articles in the warrant. They will determine the order of articles in the warrant at their meeting on January 6th, 7th. I can't, whatever that Monday is. Their next meeting after the warrant closes, they will decide what the order of the warrant is. And that will be the point at which they make all their determinations.
And
So once we submit this, I guess I would just to clarify, if we submit it, we can massage the language, but once the warrant's closed, it's on the warrant. you said it goes to the printer on the 24th, but that doesn't mean we have the ability to pull the article during that time frame. After
You can
the-
put the article at town meeting floor, you just don't have to move it.
Oh, I know. But that looks, honestly, I think that
doesn't
looks a
look
little
good.
sloppy, like,
It does.
what are we doing?
And it creates this question about what are we talking about, right? Because it's the first time anyone's talked about changing the way budgets are presented in the town. It comes to my earlier comment, so I'm uncomfortable with it. So my view is hold, but obviously the committee can decide.
Other thoughts?
So we can change the wording after this is submitted to whatever we'd like, correct? Or pull it before it goes to get printed? Given the, no, am I wrong there?
No, I think once it's in the warrant on the 6th,
Then it's going to print no
I don't
matter.
think you
gonna
can
be
pull
in
it out
there,
altogether. You
You
can
can just change the wording.
change it, and then when you get to town meeting, you can say, well, we're not gonna move the article, which I always think looks a little,
This may,
Don.
this may explain why I sometimes see an article that says withdrawn, and there's no text at all. So between, if they made
could do
that
that.
decision between those dates, we could do that.
I'm
And
okay with that, just have a header, potential article.
This, while we don't have the detail, we don't know, the people who behind this are not in the room. We do know that, I'm sorry?
Carmen, you're not on mute.
We do know that, that we are, it is responsive to some discussion we've had. And I suspect that it was prepared because somebody felt there was a need for it, rather than a superfluous sort of a thing. So since there may be a need for some sort of a change, in order for us to present the guideline in the format we've decided, we would like to do, a single budget for the town.
I haven't decided that. Who
Okay.
decided that?
Thank you, Chris. We've discussed the possibility of
We
presenting a
have,
single
But I
budget for
don't
the
think
town.
we've agreed that that's our, that
Fair
that's what
enough.
we want to do.
Fair enough, right. And perhaps this was intended to make that a possibility.
I think it
and,
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess one question would be, if we don't do this, are we foreclosing that possibility? Greg, your point was, well, we can just apply the same number across the board if we wish to, correct? Yeah.
I don't mind if we put something that's vague, that just doesn't say much of anything, that says, hey, we're thinking about, adding flexibility to our bylaw with respect to guidelines, and have it as a placeholder. If the moderator would allow that, I'm fine with that, and then that gives us a chance to actually have the discussion.
And we can
Needs
explain
to be,
it in the.
needs
in
to
the
be
FinCom
clearly
report.
defined what it is you're asking for. A reasonable person reading the warrant needs to understand the subject matter which is likely to come before the meeting. Otherwise, it's not an acceptable motion to go into the warrant.
Suresh.
I'm sorry.
Suresh has his hand up.
Very fresh at the end up.
I think I agree with Chris and Amrit. Going into this article right now without having a previous discussion, it's a little too premature. And also based upon what happened on the town meeting floor last year, I feel like we're trying to do something to show something. And I think it's a little too, let's have a discussion, maybe go to the 2025 town meeting warrant rather than the 2024.
If Parashar wants to call a special meeting to talk about it, he can, right? We still have time to do that. So I would suggest, I would say we tell him we didn't understand this, we wanted to talk about it.
That assumes that we submit something tomorrow, correct? So the moderator said we have to
I'm
get something
not
in
sure,
tomorrow.
I'm not sure there's any particular urgency for the finance committee to make this change. If you did sit on it and wait for another year, I'm not sure that I see a very large problem with that. This is a kind of clarification issue, and if you don't do it, I'm not seeing that it would necessarily handicap the finance committee between now and 2025 annual town meeting.
Okay. So I move that we table it.
Second.
Second,
Any other discussion?
Okay. Roll call. We'll go this way. Quasi.
Yes.
Greg.
Yes.
Dawn.
Yes.
Peggy.
Yes.
Colin.
Aye.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Eric. Yes. Suresh.
Yes.
Amrith.
Yes.
Okay. It's everyone. It is tabled. Thank you. Thank you, Carmen. Okay, our next item is item number 3 on the agenda, the Concord 250th Executive Committee update on warrant article. And we've allotted 15 minutes of meeting time for this. Rick Laughlin is here to discuss this.
Good evening, all. Rick Laughlin. I'm on the Executive Committee, and I'm the Finance Chair. Thank you for getting me on early. I think it was about a year ago that I was here once again, bringing up some money issues. I think we have a little more clarity a year later than maybe we did a year ago. Unfortunately, our Public Safety Chair, Fred Ryan, is unable to be with us, and since a lot of the things we're talking about are over public safety, but I think he's delineated some of that in the report. I believe, according to Eric, everyone has received the questions and answers from that Carolyn put forward. So let me just hit the highlights and then throw it open to any questions. Obviously, at the public hearing, we're going to have more detail in the next 30 to 45 days as we move forward. The budget currently is $700,000. It's the currently committed funds of $700,000, and 53% of that is the public safety budget.
Can I ask you a question, Rick? So was the 700,000 amounts that were appropriated last year? Is that where that comes
Yes,
from?
it's the ARPA funds and the 200 from the state,
Okay,
yes.
so that was from last year's
That's all,
budget.
we've received nothing else at this
Yep.
point. And on the Monday Select Board meeting, this upcoming Monday, we will decide who's going to sponsor the article, whether it's the Select Board or Concord 250. So we're asking for a $350,000 warrant article to help fund public safety. I think question number 2, I think it's important to note that the program that Fred is putting forward includes all assets and resources, including personnel, to fully execute an event action plan according to the FEMA rules. And I think when you look at the notes that Fred has put together, I think the critical thing is that everyone thinks it's just the day of a parade, et cetera, but it's a 4 or 5 day get ready. Public Works has things to do, fire, police. There's a lot more than just a 4-hour parade. It's 4 or 5 days of getting things ready with all the different organizations involved. And Fred's final comment in the letter was event action planning is ongoing and incomplete. The above list is solely for the purpose of responding to the current question, and we'll continue to monitor everything that relates to public safety. On the number 3 question, we anticipate, based on the budgets that Fred has done, is the additional $350,000, and that's the purpose of the warrant article. We are certainly talking to the state. We've had meetings with state legislators, and there's a potential for state funding, but once again, you can't count on it, and we probably wouldn't know anything until spring or summer of next year. But we are certainly working on that end. The fund, where would we like the money to come from at this point? We're just addressing the $350,000 to free cash. And who will oversee the authorizations? The town manager does that, and as the finance chair, all bills come through to me. I approve them. Executive committee reviews them with me, and then they go off to finance for payment. Just as an update of the $700,000 we've spent in 2 years, we've spent $5,000 on some mundane expenses, stationery, envelopes, et cetera. The $50,000 for the IMA, which the select board will ratify Monday night, will probably be spent sometime in January. That's the first major expense, the intra-town marketing agreement between Concord, Lexington, Lincoln, and Arlington, which will help us really define a lot of our marketing issues, et cetera, to get things done on the communications, websites, and things like that. And finally, number 6, what is the status of private donations, et cetera? As finance chair, I've been meeting, we didn't meet a lot up until the past couple of months, but we're now meeting quite a bit. We expect to begin fundraising with local philanthropists and businesses in January, and a townwide mailing probably sometime in the spring, tied into the 2024 parade, et cetera, which will give us a good public relations event to send a mailing to the town. So that's kind of the quick and easy answers to the 6 questions. So thank you, Carolyn, for posing them, and I think it was a good response. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I do.
Chris?
Chris?
So do you have a full budget
Yes.
besides this? And do you know what the full budget is now?
Well, I think you have the budget in there, and
Yeah,
it's
I s-
$700,000, and we have
But is that for
section.
everything?
That's for everything at this point, and we have
Okay.
aspirational subcommittees they're
Okay.
gonna have to get grants, they're gonna have to hope that we fundraise the appropriate amounts to
Okay.
see some of the things they wanna do, but right
Okay.
now,
Because last year we were talking much bigger numbers.
yes.
Yeah, right, 2
Yeah,
million, right? So
yeah.
this is a much, okay, so
Well,
it's,
we were, to be quite frank, after meeting with the town manager and the executive committee, we said, we have 700,000, we can't be, spending money that we don't have, so we had to put everything into the 700,000, and then, that brings up the town meeting
Right.
article, because of public safety is an expensive event, and any other things that the aspirational pieces that subcommittees are working on will have to be funded through grants or fundraising, whatever. So,
okay. And the money that you want for public safety is for a one-day event, the parade, is that correct? Or is it
No,
more than
it's,
one
as
day?
I said, it's, the public safety issue is, as Fred Ryan, having been involved as the police chief in Arlington and also a Concord police officer, has dealt with these things. There's 2 or 3 days prior to and 2 or 3 days afterwards relating to public works cleanup, fire and police.
But it's
et
all
cetera.
around the parade?
Yeah, well, that week, there may even be, at this point, I think, instead of they used to have a Patriots Day ball, so-called, I think we're talking about the weekend before, maybe some kind of a spring festival that would tie into the events, et cetera. That may require some public safety, but I don't think it's a
But the
huge amount.
major event you're anticipating is the parade, and that's what's.
Right, that's what
Okay.
brings the potentially 100, 200,000 people to the town.
Okay,
And, you can't control some of the issues relating to
Right.
the date of a parade 15 months out with
Right.
political discord and weather, et cetera, so we have to be prepared.
where will they park? Is the parking
That's certainly one of the-
included in this, or?
That's certainly one of the pieces we're working on is where will they park, what transportation is available to move people around. It's certainly one of the key things it's going to be dealt with in the next couple of months.
Is that included in your budget, or no?
Well, some of it is, we have Hanscom Field, the high school, we have places to park people. It really then becomes a transportation issue with the school buses, et cetera. So there is probably a financial piece in there.
Okay. And so, other than you're looking for grants and so forth, is there any other expected revenues that are there fees or any sort associated with this?
Well, we have, we're looking at, a coin and things like that, but
nominal.
from 1975, we didn't make a ton of money on coins. It's maybe make a little
Got it.
money, 25, 30,000 if you're
Okay.
lucky. So-
Thank you.
The
Other
day,
questions?
the
Kathy?
day of the event, there'll be speakers, and will the main event be
That-
centered around the North Bridge?
Yes, that's the plan. I'm only in charge of the money at this point. I'm not in charge of the events and who's coming. We've had many discussions about who should be invited, et cetera. I won't go down that path at this point.
So I see at the budget's 700,000 now. If you get this 350,000, does that, then your total budget go up to 1,050,000? Or does this kind of
I think-
offset the
I
700?
think the budget you have, the way to explain it is, public safety is 375
Okay,
plus the 350.
Plus the 350.
So
Yes.
it is kind of the 1,050,000 is the total if you get the 350,000.
I may not
Okay.
have done that right,
No.
just let me,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna ask.
Okay.
Just to clarify, we're up to
Yeah.
1,050,000.
Right, with the 350,000 that they're gonna
700 plus
request.
350.
Yeah, okay.
Is that right, Rick?
the public safety budget is currently, if you look at that preliminary budget plan, we took the $150,000 that was for the parade and moved it up into the 375 for public safety, which was 250, which makes it the 375. And I don't really think we look at if we get the 350, obviously, the total budget for public safety could be 750,000, yes. So that's what the 350 will handle. What's in this budget plus the 350.
And the whole budget goes up as well, okay.
It's a little confusing, but that's where the money will have to go. And we don't have, I mean, could the final public safety numbers be less? Could we get state funding? You know, all those things we'll know hopefully in the next 6 to 7 months.
If you do, but one question, if you do get additional, if you secure additional funding, would that reduce the amount of the warrant article? Or the warrant, that's 350 either way?
We would think so. Obviously, the town meeting may come before any kind of state funding is available. So that's, the timing is the problem there. And we need to get on this town meeting because the town meeting for the next year is too late, so.
Well, it's a little bit like the teacher's contract. If you have the money, how are you gonna raise money privately? If the town's already giving you the 350, they're gonna say, well, you don't need the money because you just got it from the town, it's that chicken and egg thing.
But, I mean, I think the fundraising, some of the aspirational subcommittees, they are, they're hoping that fundraising will move some of their events in the right direction, because right now, with the 700,000, their budgets have been cut significantly.
Okay.
Amrith?
Yeah, thanks. There was 2 questions I had. One, it was said that this is likely not the complete budget and there's likely to be more expenses coming. Do we have a sense for how much more or what percentage do we think we're at right now? That's the first. And the second is, what tangible benefit other than historical and the commemoration is there to the town? You're bringing a bunch of people into the town, but I don't know how many businesses are actually going to be able to stay open in the midst of all of this, or is the intention that there's going to be a bunch of revenue to the local businesses as well?
Well, the data that we've seen, it certainly would be revenue to the local businesses. You can't gauge how much. I think it really comes back to, this is a celebration of an event that occurred in Concord, and I think in 1975, which I was here for that particular event, the crowds were significant, and people do come to these type of events. Concord and Lexington are extremely prominent, and there are people that are going to come, and we need to be prepared to deal with that. So can we forecast how many people? No, but I mean, we have a pretty good idea from normal parades in 1975 that there's going to be a significant amount of people here. The answer to your first question is everyone all the subcommittees did submit budgets, and basically they've all been put on hold because the money we have is $700,000, and some of them they've either got to go out to grants or part of our fundraising program. And what it means is some of them will have to not be able to do some of the events that they had hoped to do, and that will be a disappointment for some of them. We have Arts and Literature Committee that has 10 or 12 local Concord organizations that really want to be involved and do things, create music and whatever. So, yes, there were higher numbers, and hopefully that through the other events I just mentioned, that we'll be able to supply the funds so they won't have to cut too much. But cutting is a possibility.
Sorry, Eric, may I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Please? But do we have a sense, for example, one of the questions which was asked was, where are all these people going to park? I don't know if you mentioned a ballpark of how many people you think are going to be at this event, but I think it's going to be in the, definitely in some numbers of thousands or tens of thousands and things like that. So, okay, if they're going to be parking on Hanscom Field and you're going to be running school buses, what do we think that's going to cost? Do we have at least an idea of how many digits it is?
I don't have any answer to what the cost would be at this point. I think we would obviously have to identify locations. People are working on that, public safety people are working on it. Obviously, it also hinges for the Lexington Parade, because our parade's in the morning. People have to be transported over to Lexington Parade participants. There's certainly a cost attached. I can't give you that answer at this point, but that was something we'd have to work out, obviously, in the next few months.
Thank you.
Chris.
I had a question. You had mentioned in one of your responses that you also would pursue funds from CPC, and there's also already some sort of public ceremony budget within the town. Could you speak to that for a second?
Well, I think the Memorial Committee has applied to CPC.
Have, okay.
They have asked for some money there, which has been, I think they had to have it submitted in December.
How much was it, Diane?
I don't have that number right with me,
Okay.
Chris, but it has been approved.
It was approved, okay. I know it was submitted, it was, I think, early December, or early November it had to be in.
I checked their website today and I didn't see any, I thought it was still under discussion.
Okay.
I believe it's been consummated.
Okay.
I missed the last two meetings because of pneumonia, but my understanding is that it's, you know, that it has been finalized and agreed upon.
Okay.
Do you know how much it was, Peggy?
Let me see what I can
Sorry?
do.
Do you know how much it was, the request?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
My recollection,
It wasn't a whole lot, like
Okay.
100 or.
100 and something thousand, yeah.
Okay, so that would be in addition to the 700 and the 350, and it could be another 100
That's
over
part
here.
of the permanent memorial, part of their
Okay.
budget, so, yes. And they're still looking at other avenues for grants, et cetera, on that. What was the other question?
There's some sort of a parade or public ceremonies budget in the town
Yes,
already?
what the town manager and our chair, Gary, worked out is because there's normal public ceremonies expense every year for parade, whether it's not as big a number as 2025, but it's somewhere $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 that normally would be in the operating budget. So we took that money out of the parade in 2020, for the parade, our parade budget, and put it into the operating budget with meetings with the town manager. So that's where we found the parade was roughly estimated around 150,000. We put that into the 250, which was in the original public safety budget under that 700,000. They were at 250. We gave them the 150, which brought them to 375, but we still need the 350 in the warrant article to cover the public safety cost.
Okay, so you're gonna imply some of the expenses against
Yes.
the town. The town has some budget in there for that, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, what year exactly is the parade?
2025.
So it's this budget?
15 months away, roughly. Time is going by much too fast.
Okay.
And this is good, you're looking for this from free cash.
Yes.
Yeah, it's 125.
Okay.
But it doesn't
Why don't
say
we,
whether it's-
why don't we hold it there? Thanks for the presentation, Rick, and for answering our questions. More to come on this, of
We'll
course.
see you at the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next item is Planning Board update on MBTA Communities Act. Linda Miller from the Planning Board is here to provide an update. This is something we talked about in our previous two meetings, so thank you for coming, Linda. I have your presentation. I can share it if you want to tell me when to.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, I'm Linda Miller, 300 Main Street, and I'm Chair of the Planning Board, and hope to bring something that generates some revenues as opposed to requires additional resources. So the presentation, I'd just like to talk about why Massachusetts has decided that MBTA communities is appropriate for our region, what the requirements are, also what our proposed district is that we believe will be compliant with the law, go through the model results and summary showing our compliance. I'm going to talk a little bit about economic considerations, but a very little bit, because there's really not a lot that the law puts into play, but just thought that this was the group of any that might want to hear about that, and then talk about our next steps. So this is essentially the premise of the law is that Massachusetts is in a housing crisis. We could discuss that or not, but that is really what this law is attempting to address. It's about creating more housing. Massachusetts is among the highest and fastest growing home prices and rents of any state in the nation. Rising costs have dramatically increased financial pressure on families, particularly low and middle income families. And these high costs are a disadvantage as Massachusetts tries to compete economically against peer states and create jobs that people will be able to fill. So again, the state viewed this as a regional issue. It's not Concord specific. There are 177 towns that are included in the MBTA Communities Act, and there are a variety of categories of towns. Rapid transit, as you can see, is the inner circle around Boston. We are a commuter rail community, and then there are adjacent communities such as Lexington and adjacent small towns. Each has a different level of requirement to fulfill for the state. But in general, all of the communities have to create a new multifamily zoning district as of right. And I'm emphasizing zoning district because what we're creating is zoning. There's no requirement for building or construction. As of right means that that you reduce in the impediments for the development. That is, there are no special permits and no waivers allowed for this housing that will be, or for the zoning. There must be at least one reasonably sized district of developable land. And so developable land means that there are a lot of lands that are excluded. Any municipal, state, federal land is excluded. Institutional land, schools, prisons and so on is excluded. Any land that is involved as a source of water for the community is excluded, conservation land and so on. And density is another key part of the requirement. Must be a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre for the full district. And then transit orientation is also a key component of this law, which is that, again, based on the type of community you have, that a certain portion has to be within half a mile of a transit station. Also, it has to be family-oriented and no age restrictions allowed on the zoning. So the compliance requirements for Concord as a commuter rail community and having 2020 census data that puts us in a class of small to mid-sized communities with 7,295 dwelling units. Our capacity is 15% of that, so that we are providing zoning for 1,094 units. The land area that we're required to have in our district is a minimum of 50 acres. Of that, 50% has to be located, at least 50% located within the station area, and 50% of that capacity, or that 1,094 units, also has to be located within half a mile of the station areas. And again, the density requirement is 15 dwelling units per acre. So the next slide would show what our district is. There are 5 sub-districts that comprise it. I'm not going to go generally into any detail on those, but just to note that most of the area looks within, and if it's not within the district, it's very close to it. So as you can see, we're looking for density pretty close to the transit areas and to our town centers. This is the results of the compliance model, and we are providing Concord with just enough land area, units, and density to be compliant. So of the district acreage, 50 acres required, we're at 84.4, but some of those, as you see in the second figure of 52.7, show that there's a lot of non-developable area within those districts. The acreage within the transit area and the capacity within the transit area, again, is just over 50%, at 53 and 51%. Our final unit capacity, compared to the 1,094 units that we're required to have, is about 10% more, 1,198. And the dwelling units per acre total over the district, about 22 to 23, but you can see it varies widely based on the specific areas that are included as sub-districts. So now to get to the economic elements of it, I think the important questions that we had early on from the Finance Committee and those who had interest in what the financial impact was, had to do with infrastructure. What do we have to do in terms of infrastructure to be compliant with this law? And the answer is not really anything. So I just thought I'd put that in front of you. It says that compliance does not require a municipality to install new water or wastewater infrastructure or add to existing capacity to accommodate any of this. And further on, it indicates that for purposes of the unit capacity analysis, it's assumed that housing developers will design projects that work within existing water and wastewater constraints, and that developers, municipality, or the Commonwealth will provide funding for infrastructure upgrade as needed for individual projects. So again, it's speculative to think of what the projects might be, but when they come forward, they will go through the regular approval process, and they will have to be shown by the developers to be able to work within the existing infrastructure that we have or that we will build. And finally, in terms of determinants of compliance, it's noted that if you are not compliant, there will be certain economic disincentives for noncompliance or for not complying with, and that indicates that there will be a number of grants that the community won't be eligible for, or that the community will not be a priority for.
Do we get any of them now?
I think that we do. I don't know.
I think
that
it's
we've
de
got
minimis.
two finance people who can answer that better than I, but I don't believe that they're significant.
But we're so
Yeah.
not much now, but we are very interested in the future in being eligible for these grant programs.
Okay. And I think Andrea Campbell made some threatening noises about litigation, did she not, if you were beyond this?
I think that's probably a statement you could say that's independent of whether it's the MBTA communities or not. She can make a lot of threatening statements about whatever she wants, but those are threatening statements. I don't,
Okay.
but I would say, experience has shown recently, I don't know if you're that familiar with the Newton situation and the approval there, but they have a long-term proposal to upgrade 3 of their commuter rail stations, which is a $170 million project that they're working on with the MBTA. And the MBTA did tell them that while they are currently included in the $9.6 billion infrastructure upgrade plan that the MBTA has, that there are more requests for that than they could provide to support, and that would, their compliance with 3A would be considered in whether they got that $170 million project going forward. So
Didn't the town of Milton vote to just ignore this whole thing, and they said no, and they
Holden
Holden, okay.
did. Holden is the one out of 177 that has decided not to comply. And they took that to the courts, and it was upheld. But that doesn't mean that they won't have funding denied, and it doesn't also mean that there isn't other merit to having multifamily housing, transit-oriented with increased density. And I think, I mean, there are a lot of merits to having multifamily housing, both in terms of improving sustainability through town, improving vitality around our business centers. So I think there are a lot of other issues that are addressed with this, but the key issue is the state is very emphatic about wanting to supply more multifamily housing everywhere they possibly can, because the economy demands that for growth.
Colin?
You keep saying multifamily housing, and I know you've got another slide or two here to get through.
Oh.
But Linda, are you saying multifamily housing or affordable housing? And if so, what's the difference?
Multifamily housing is just a housing unit that has 3 or more units in it. This is, the presumption is that housing will be more affordable, but it doesn't matter. You could build condos, you could build $2 million condos that's multifamily housing, and it would be considered multifamily housing under this. And in fact, I am going to do one, I think, last slide here that talks about next steps. And one issue is the issue of affordability, and the planning board will be discussing that again at our next meeting next Tuesday. There is no requirement for affordable housing to be considered in this regulation, so it does not have to be satisfied. We could have zero affordability required, and there is a maximum amount of affordable housing that you can request, which is 10%. So that would,
So this is going to drive up the denominator for 40B dramatically.
it could.
So if you add,
Well, may I
Yeah.
continue?
Yes, please,
Just,
sorry.
but if you wish to push above the 10% limit, there's a ceiling of 20%, but you must do an economic feasibility analysis to show that that would be feasible to be built by a developer. And so the town will be pursuing that, but we don't know the answer to that. And essentially, they're saying that towns cannot use affordable housing requirements to discourage the building of multifamily housing. So we should be able to keep our heads above water by putting in the 10%, so at least we're not subsidizing the rest of the town to have to help us get to the limit of 10% so that we make our SHI requirements. But if we want to go above that, we have to show that a developer will not be disincented to build the development because we have too much a burden of affordability. So if you want to weigh in on that, please join us on Tuesday to try and figure our way through that. So the next steps are to clarify the affordability issue, to submit this, just like you were talking about, by our deadline is January 3rd, but maybe it's a different deadline for you, to complete that economic feasibility study. And that the next most important thing is there will be site plan rules and regulations permitted. And so that will be what we turn to in January to decide what other requirements that we would like to encourage developers to include in their development, though we cannot require those things under site plan rules and regulations. And with that, we will be continuing our engagement with the community. We're hoping you all might be supportive individually or as a group as we get to town meeting. And then we have a deadline to support a compliant, approved zoning plan to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities by the end of the year. So I'm happy to take any questions
Don?
you might have.
And Linda, thank you for this. It's very helpful. The way I'd like to know whether you, the way I'm looking at it is accurate or not. Our current zoning that prohibits construction of more than one unit on a lot is a restraint or a constriction on property owners' rights. And this is a lessening of that constraint. It doesn't require that anyone build multiple units. You can still build from, say, if under this zoning, an owner has the right to build up to 4 units, they can still build a single family if they choose to. But they could build up to 4 units, and it is, as I see it, broadening the rights of property owners. Would you, yes, I see you nodding.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. That's a very difficult concept to get across to people, so thank you very much. It is, so this is an overlay district. I didn't go into a lot of details because I know you all have limited and valuable time, but it's an overlay district. So the property owner has the right to develop their property as it currently exists in today's zoning. However, they can elect to comply with the overlay district. And then, and if they have a nice McMansion and they want to chop it up into 4 units, that would be great. And that should presumably enhance the value of the property and the property taxes that you all will be able to take a dollar sign or a percentage of when you when you see that new growth.
And a follow-up, it would be, does it at all change the amount of the FAR or the amount of building that can be put on a lot?
Great question. This is a kind of complicated conceptually, and when you get in the granular level, it gets more complicated. So what we decided to do with this pass is to not change the underlying dimensional requirements. So if it really was just to make it simple and understandable, and I think easy to see how it might be implemented, and then we can always change dimensional requirements. But the height requirement that you currently face, the setbacks, the parking requirements are not going to change from this overlay, from the underlying.
Great.
So it's hopefully about as slimmed down and simple, because again, the concept is tough for
Good. I think
people.
that will be helpful to people who worry about big apartment buildings appearing. If you could build a 4,000 square foot house as of right today, you could build 4 1,000 square foot units in the same size structure under this, and it's not going to impact. Thanks.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
I have a non-finance question for you.
Uh-oh.
How does the planning board see this changing the complexion of the town?
I think it feels like we're in line with a lot of the goals of the town. Number one, sustainability. It's just, again, if you can take the same size land and fit 4 families in it, or and have higher density, more walkability, less reliance on fossil fuel, and people closer to transit stations, it goes in line with our goals there. In terms of building up our town centers, having more people in the town centers, using transit, living where they shop, living where they find entertainment, restaurants. It should be adding to people's desire to be in a livable, vibrant town center. So in terms of having a variety of options, maybe smaller apartments that might be less expensive, it helps with economic diversity. Maybe that leads to other elements of diversity and equity. So I think people on the planning board feel that the goals that are in our long-term plan and in our housing production plan are aligned with the goals here. I think the other feelings are that, you know, a lot of people say this doesn't go far enough. It's a pretty conservative, slim plan. It's, you know, and so I think there's a lot of feeling amongst housing advocates that this is about as, you know, conservative as it could be and still comply. And I think there are a lot of people who say the planning board is not the board to decide that we're not going to comply. You know, our job was to find something that was compliant and in line with town goals, and that we hope is approvable at town meeting, because we have a town meeting, and a lot of towns that have already approved and gotten agreement on their plans are not town, or they're representative town meetings, or they have town councils. So this is, what we're hoping is something that people can support, and for those, and that it's a good compromise between complying and adding to the diversity of our housing stock. I hope that's an answer.
Peggy, last questions?
Yes, the map that you showed for the MBTA community zoning areas, one is the subject of a recent 40B application
Yes,
on Baker
ma'am.
Avenue.
Mhm.
So will that 40B go forward as a 40B with the 25% affordability in it? Even though it's now going to have that potentially, as of right, with no affordability? That would be my concern.
Right. We are, you know, it's a parallel path. I think they're pretty far along with that path. I
Yeah.
doubt that they're going to want to
Slow down and wait for
slow
zoning.
down and not take the advantage of having that. Obviously, they believe with 25% affordability, they're going to make some money. They also would have to go with the underlying zoning requirement of only 3 stories. So I
Okay.
think that probably would maybe change some of the economics the way they foresee them now, and I don't know that I'm sure they're very smart and will push the pencil, because they're a
Sure.
very impressive group that way,
Well,
but,
and it's an excellent place for you to do this zoning. You've already got a project proposed there.
we sort of,
It works out well.
it was more a collision than a plan.
Train crash.
Yeah, you know, but,
Yes.
but I think it's, you know, it's a great area to be developed,
Oh, yeah.
you know, between the rail trail, the dense, you know, the vitality of West Concord. You know, it's made for multifamily, you know, just even things like, you know, you can park during the day for the business centers, you know, and then people can be home at night and use the parking there and share. It's just, I think, a very sound area to plan this. And I guess we had various routes to get there, and it looks like it's going to happen, but, yeah. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you,
the
Linda.
time. And if you have any follow-up questions, let us, all of us know.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next agenda item, fiscal year 2025 budget requests. We're going to hear from the school administration while they get set up. Anthony, on the town budget, we're going to hear from you on that at our next meeting in January? Is that the plan? Okay.
We had these, so if you want paper, we have that. Otherwise, we'll take it and keep it for our next.
I'll take one.
Hey, Eric, quick question about the previous presentation. Can we get a copy of that? It wasn't in the packet.
It should be in your packet,
The
Amrith.
revised packet that was
Yeah.
sent out.
The most recent one that Laura sent out.
Oh, okay. Let me go look for that. Thanks.
And we've allocated 45 minutes for this presentation and discussion.
Do you have a preference, which?
Up to you.
Okay. You want to start with CPS?
CPS, sure.
You guessed wrong, Greg?
CCRSD is first in the pack.
Oh, it's one page.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I thought it was.
Okay.
Is that?
I just need to log on to the meeting, which I forgot to do.
All right. Well, they're going to have paper in front of them in a minute. Bob just has to get on the Zoom so people at home can see.
Two separate.
Yeah.
Do you want a screen share, Bob?
Yeah,
You
that's
can
what I
walk
was
through
gonna
some.
do.
Pulling it
I'm
up.
just calling up the meeting, logging into the Zoom.
Court's got it. Diane, do you want hard copy? Carrie, do you want to? Who doesn't want a packet of slides? You've got it. Huh? You want it? Hard
Connery.
copy? No, thank you. You've had it a few times.
I can't hear, hang on one second.
CONRY.
Okay, yeah, muted. Okay,
All right. Good.
yeah. Presentation.
6 years, 6th grade.
I thought it was just number of students.
Yeah, it is number of students. Concord Middle School, it's 3 grades.
CCRSD.
Elementary, 6th grade.
No, they put CPS is what we told them.
Okay.
Yeah, Carl.
Yeah, we're gonna do CPS first.
Right, they're going all the way to the end.
All right.
first. This is regional.
I cannot share the screen while the other participant's sharing.
I just stopped.
Okay. Okay, we're through the technical difficulties and on to our budget presentation. Thanks for your patience. So we've presented to our school committee on December 5th and have an opportunity tonight to present to you. So I don't know, I think we might have had a liaison who attended our meetings, but probably new to many of you. So we're going to walk through it, and I think if there's questions that relate to the slides we present, maybe it's easier to ask the questions as they surface. Certainly we can take some at the end of each presentation too. So I'm going to start with the Concord Public Schools budget. So, just a high-level view of our process. This is probably not new to most of you, but just wanted to highlight quickly, it is a zero-based budget process. We don't carry over funds from year to year. We build it ground up. We work with our administrators in each school, the principals, the central office, our special education director of student services, does a student-by-student budget for out-of-district placements. So it's a detailed line item process. We also work with the department heads in the schools, both at the high school and in the middle school, and a lot of the curriculum and work is done centrally in coordination with curriculum teams. We're at a point now where we're presenting our preliminary budget, which is labeled kind of the superintendent's recommended budget, and that's what we're presenting right now. We've also presented to school committee, and we're sharing it with Concord officials. We shared it with Carlisle last week, or earlier this week. It's a little bit of a blur. We're certainly cognizant of the town planning process that works in parallel with us. We receive some new information as we go as well. Some of the information we receive that would be helpful to get and more in relation to our regional budget doesn't happen until January, where we get state aid information. I'm sure the town faces the same challenge. So we'll go through the process now on where we are, but just wanted to frame big picture what our process looks like. First thing is our enrollment trends we wanted to share, and our middle school, the orange and the blue represent Concord Public Schools, which we'll just focus on for now. We've had a slight increase, 14 students in the elementary schools, and pretty stable, an increase of 3 students at the middle school.
Bob, is the 14 connected to the Best Western situation?
They'd contribute to it, certainly.
How many folks do we have in there? Is it 18?
From the Best Western?
Yes.
We now have 20, I want to speak to you accurately. 23 at Willard, and two at the middle school and 4 at the high school.
So
Plus the kids we transport out of district, and we have enrolled 4 preschoolers and have 6 referrals waiting.
Okay. So the projected growth, this is not projection, is it? This is October?
October 1.
Yeah, these are actuals.
So these are actuals, right?
Yeah.
So would that include those 25 students or no?
It would include the ones that were enrolled October 1st, which is the majority of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So most of the growth is from that?
Yeah, the enrollments are fairly stable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
After we've had this small decline that happened over the last few years, which is making its way up towards the high school, you'll see, but otherwise quite stable.
Our per pupil expenditures, this is similar to what we presented last year. It's just been updated with FY22 information. It's the most recent available information from the state. This slide comes from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, which thought it's helpful to kind of look at the districts that we typically benchmark with, and so that's what those districts represent. And the state average is on the far right. And so we're kind of with a group of, slightly behind Wellesley, with a group of districts, Newton, Lincoln Sudbury, and Needham's close.
So Lincoln Sudbury is the high school?
It is, yeah.
And where is Sudbury, the regular school?
We don't benchmark with them, so off the
Why
top of
not?
my head, I don't know. We basically had selected a group of peer districts a while ago to be consistent in what we benchmark with. I mean, I can find out.
No,
but, yeah.
I'm just making sure we have apples to apples, right? Some of those schools will be high schools, some of them will be combined districts, some of them won't be. So we have ours broken out separately. That's my only comment, is it might not be apples to apples in your
Yeah.
comparison.
Our budget objectives are to maintain our existing programs and supports to students. Really, that's a level service definition. Support our strategic plan initiatives, and then to meet our legal mandates for special education and homelessness and homeless students and other legal mandates. Our proposed budget is $46,602,000. That's a 3.45% increase over the '24 budget. At a very high level, the key drivers are teaching and instructional support costs, which are the bulk of that in actual dollars. And then out-of-district tuitions are down $300,000 net, and we'll go into more detail in each of the expense categories here. So these categories are the kind of the core functions of a district. Administration costs are up 6.4%, and we're going to go into each of these, but you can see here that, out of the $1.5 million increase, the bulk of our budget is in teaching and instructional support. It's where we would want it to be. Other school services includes things like transportation, nursing services, and maintenance is where all of our utilities, facility support costs are. And so I'll go into each of these line items in more detail, but just to give you a big picture view of what it looks like. And from a staffing standpoint, we wanted to highlight what our staffing looks like, and really all of the changes are in teaching and instructional support. We'll go into this in more detail. Some of this is really being primarily driven by preschool. We do not, and I should also add, these are our general fund budget. I'm not including food service in here, which is funded by a revolving fund. So the bulk of our increase there is preschool. We have 4 additional instructional assistants there. We had to add an additional section based on enrollment needs driven by special education. We have 2 assistants per classroom, and then we have 2 students that we have one-to-one needs for that were added. And one of them was actually added during last school year in the spring. We had to add staff late in the year, and the second was added recently.
Are the preschool numbers included in the enrollment, or is that outside of it?
In the slide,
Yeah.
previous slide?
No, that's just elementary.
It's just elementary.
Just elementary. So
Yeah.
what is the preschool enrollment look like?
We're at about 70 kids, including the regular education and special education kids.
And what was that in the prior year?
I don't have it right in front of me, but we're definitely up a good, so it's proportional because we add general education students to make sure that we have inclusion opportunities for the regular ed. So because of the growth in special ed, it also grows the regular education side where those kids tuition in. So it's a package. So we're probably up 12 or so.
And
Those
that
are all
would create
rough
a new
numbers.
section, 12
And add a
12
Yeah,
children.
there's a cap on how many you can have per classroom.
Okay, yeah.
And these budgeted FTE, this includes like open positions that happen to be open for
Correct.
vacancies? Okay.
Correct.
And do you have a sense of how many are vacant right
Ugh.
now? Is it just,
I do. The principals are drowning in trying to fill their support staff. Those are the ones we're struggling with, like every school district is. So we have 2 right now at preschool and I think 2 at Alcott. So it's not huge numbers, and believe me, we are desperate to fill them because we need them filled. So we're actively working on that.
My perspective is that it's shockingly few from where I have been. Like, I
Yeah.
think a lot
Yeah.
of districts are
Yeah.
struggling a lot more. We have some vacancies more than maybe we typically do, but
Yeah. We're not struggling to fill teaching positions and other things, which certainly other districts are.
So the $500,000 in budget surplus that we had, I think at the end of '23, did that come from attrition or interest? What did that come from?
we didn't have a surplus at the end of '23.
What was this 500,000 somewhere that shows in the, I'm sorry, that's the high school. Never mind,
Okay.
not CPS. Sorry.
Save that for the next budget.
I will.
We can go through that.
I will.
And this is just a little bit more detail on the FTEs. So it's, we've done a kind of a review of what our needs are, and so there are some increases, there are some decreases. I mentioned the additions of the preschool. We've also looked at our special education staffing, and there's some reductions based on caseload analysis, some work done by some people looking at benchmarking information. We've had to add 2 FTEs back that were they're staff that have been here, but they were budgeted through ESSER funds. We had tried to roll them into the budget, but with some financial challenges, we weren't able to earlier. This year we are. We were actually able to do it a little bit earlier at the high school. But so here, that's 2 of the FTE additions they're not new staff. They're just related to the expiration of ESSER funding.
You know how much that's worth, Bob?
I think one of the positions is about 95,000. I don't remember what the other position was.
Okay.
It was not as high. Depends on
Yeah.
the staff that we hire, where they
Yeah.
fall on the salary schedule.
So not 200, but not 100?
No,
so
it's not
maybe in
that
the
high.
middle
The
somewhere.
other one's
Okay.
not as much.
And we had 2 FTEs that were enrollment driven. I referenced the preschool there in Thoreau. We had a section at Thoreau based on the student population coming incoming K this year. And then there's just one minor adjustment to an incorrect FTE number. The dollars were correct from last year. So aside from the tutors, K to 8, we have a net reduction of 1 FTEs across the schools. And in addition to that, we've had METCO, a special ed supplemental grant we've had in the past to support tutor positions. We received it a couple years ago. We anticipated it. We were getting communication that we were going to receive it. However, we haven't received it for a couple years, so we felt like we needed to pull that out of the budget. We had it supporting 2 positions, but we do need those tutors. There's some discussion over whether that might actually surface again this year. If it does, that might be an opportunity for us. We're going to certainly apply, but we have applied last year, and the grant never materialized. So,
Can I just add before you go on, when you look at the teacher specialists, there and it's referenced special education staff reductions on caseload, that is still a moving piece, but that's some really significant work we've been doing. Out, not in those intensive programs we've been talking to you about, but in the more general special education service delivery, really diving deep into look at IEP services and caseloads, and just be sure we're right-sized for enrollments and needs, and there are going to be some reductions there. I'm still identifying what they will be, but it'll be a handful of FTEs and potential RIFs even. So I just wanted to, we're not able to name what that is. I committed to the dollar amount, but not exactly what the positions are as we do our analysis. So just wanted to be sure you
Well, I can't
heard
remember
that
the
part.
last time you came in and told us sped was going down.
Well, we're constantly working at it. Between the FTE adjustments and you heard the tuitions are down too this year. So, it's a roller coaster, right? One year it's way up, and the next year we're like, oh, we got a little breathing space here, and next year it might flip the other way again.
Right. So just so I understand on the EFT, so I understand there's no number associated with
Right,
that top
right.
line, which is a potential reduction. But there's, without assuming we forget about that for a moment, so there's 4.2 on the teacher's line, and on the tutors, there's another 4, but in the elementary, it kind of nets to a 1 or so. So do we have 9? Is that what I'm looking at? I'm trying to figure out what the total FTE,
it's an increase of 4.21 in total.
in total, including the tutors?
Yep, the tutors is 4 additional. Some of the, without going into detail, some of the offsets here, there's offsets in the
Okay,
top.
so you've assumed some offsets.
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, since I don't have a number next to the special education one, that's going to come down farther. I mean, you may be flush by the time we finish.
Okay. I understand, thank you.
And does preschool tuition revenue offset any of the teacher?
Mhm,
Okay.
it
Little
does.
bit, yeah.
Some of it,
Yeah.
okay.
It's about,
We're about 100, I'm going to say 150,000 a year. It's a little more or less depending on the number of
And that's
kids.
netted in the budget somewhere?
Yeah.
it's about 15% of what we spend for preschool. Okay, so I'm going to keep going on to district administration. There are some increases there. A chunk of that is for IT equipment, supplies, and software. We have had some items that one of them is Apple mobile device management and security that we had not, it's a product called Mosel that we had not previously budgeted, we had used. We tried to offset in other ways. I think at one point it might have used ESSER funds, but that needs to be budgeted. It's an essential product for us now. So that's a chunk of what's driving the IT number up. And then we've added negotiation funds, non-bargaining. This is something that happens. We won't necessarily hire non-bargaining staff at the top of the scale. But as contracts come up or we do benchmarking information, there's sometimes needs for adjustments. So that's another driver here of the district administration costs.
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much.
The teaching and instructional support costs, the bulk of that 1.5 million is teacher and CTA salaries. We have factored in the impact of reductions that we talked about earlier for special ed, and we've also made a retirement assumption of 2 teachers. I don't think we've had any notifications yet, which is a little bit unusual, but typically we'll have at least a couple. So we've factored in some replacement cost savings for 2 retirements. The support staff is for cost of living increases plus the FTEs that I referenced for special education tutors, primarily at the preschool. And then supplies and materials. The bulk of that is we're planning to adopt a new math curriculum next year called Envisions. It's a large scale, full rollout for the middle school, and it's a significant one-time cost, about $120,000. We are looking at potentially extending the period that we're able to use it. Typically, it's a 3-year, but we're also looking at potentially leveraging it because they'll extend additional years for very little. additional costs, so that's something we're looking at.
Is it software? What is it? Or is it materials or?
Both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's mostly both these days.
Yeah.
And what will it do? What are our goals associated with it?
Oh, we have some pretty significant goals. One is to fully align the middle school so that all the standards are sequential. And right now, we have different programs at different grades. So while we're doing that, it can be much tighter to watch the language clean up and just really see kids progress one from another to another. We're also looking for depth and differentiation tools. We don't level math at the middle school anymore. So we want to make sure teachers have lots of tools at hand to meet the needs of all kids that are in a range of, skill sets in their classrooms. So we're really excited to do this finally. It's been a lot of years in the making, so exciting.
Is this something unique to us? What about surrounding, towns?
Which
The math,
So, no, I would say it's not unique to us. We're all working toward those same goals. What's unique to us, I think, is trying to be sure that we're adequately meeting both the high-end needs and the, kids that are struggling, and to be sure that we're equally servicing everyone. In terms of finding a program that can do that, I think different middle schools have taken different approaches. We've tried a lot of different approaches and have finally decided one consistent program is the smartest way to go, and this is a tried and true research-based program, so we're excited to bring that in.
Other school services is relatively, I wouldn't say flat, 3.5% increase. Some of that includes cost of living. There is a one-to-one nursing contract service for transportation that's needed for a specific student that we had to add this year into the budget. So that's driving the significant portion of the $110,000 increase.
The student is being transported to a nurse?
With a nurse.
With a nurse.
With a nurse,
Yeah.
I see.
Maintenance operations is, I would say, somewhat steady. There are some moving parts here as we go into a new middle school building. We've added 15, so overall maintenance supplies and materials and contract services are up 51,000. 15,000 of that is related to wastewater treatment contract services. That's the portion that we would pay next year. We're going to have a wastewater treatment mini plant as part of the middle school. Our facilities director is certified, but we are going to need a third party to basically, execute the services. The utilities, we have 2 months with 3 buildings online, and we'll talk about that later in here where we're highlighting some of the costs that will go away after we have a single building. But we did budget for having the new middle school in both Peabody and Sanborn online in our budget for January and February.
Is the operating cost going up or going down with the new building?
It's intended to go down. I have projections from the consultants. And I don't have a full year for FY25. It's a blended year. I can give you more detailed information on that. I have projections on kilowatt hour usage by month. I would need to compare that to our heating costs plus our electricity costs for Sanborn and Peabody. So I have the information. I just don't have it off the top of my head.
And obviously a lot of unknowns as we transition to an all-electric building from the other settings.
So in the high school budget, there was a big, looked like a surprise on, I think it was electricity. You didn't
Yeah.
have the same experience
Did
here?
not. Some of that's the budget was, some of that was, I'll talk about the budget when it's more of a CCHS budget issue than an actual rate change issue.
Okay.
I've also factored in some savings. You might recall we have a capital project that was approved for replacement of a thorough ERUs, so I've budgeted a little bit of efficiency savings once we have new units. We'll be operating a little bit more efficiently there. And then I adjusted the heating costs. We were favorable to budget, so based on our run rates, I modified that down slightly. So those are the moving pieces on the utility side. So even though we had 2 additional months with 3 buildings, we're relatively flat. Fixed charges, this is for the early retirement incentive program has ended. So the last payments are happening in FY '24. There still is some employees from when the sick time buyout provision was in the contract. And so we've kind of made an estimate of what that will be, that those payouts are down, though, overall between these two, about 22,000 year over year. Fixed assets represents some small equipment needs in the buildings. That's the increase. We've budgeted for vehicle replacement level with prior years, assuming that we're going to continue to lease buses. And out-of-district tuitions in total is down 300,000. There's two components of this net number. One is our gross tuition costs. The gross tuition costs are actually what we're paying. Those are down 286,000 or 16%. That represents 2 students. And our tuition costs are offset by revenue received from the state and from the federal government. The state circuit breaker funding is relatively flat. We're using 840,000 as a budget offset. We used 837,000 last year. 840,000 exactly what we're receiving from the state, so we're matching what we're receiving and what we're spending. The IDA offset, our grant revenue has increased a very modest amount, so those offsets, when you see the out-of-district tuition net number, that's how we arrive at the net number. This is just a high-level view of what's driving our budget. It's more salary than non-salary. So just a big picture view, and a lot of the non-salary piece is the out-of-district tuitions. High-level view of schools and FTEs. I think, Peggy, you mentioned this earlier too. This is not always the case, but it does fluctuate. But this is a year where the special education increase is very modest. It's 1% basically. More of the increases are driven by regular ed this year.
Everybody knock on wood while we say all that.
So we had requests from Parashar to include information on middle school transition costs. So we wanted to highlight that here. I have 2 months of utilities for Sanborn and Peabody that are budgeted. The Sanborn and Peabody piece for those 2 months of heat and electricity is $54,000. That will be non-recurring in FY26. So we'll see that pulled out next year. The wastewater treatment plants are only budgeted for a partial year of $15,000. It's approximately going to be double for a full year. So the net there is, a $15,000 addition. Net of the first line and second line is still a reduction of $39,000 that will come out of the FY26 budget for these transition costs that won't be there anymore. And we have anticipated additional savings of $500,000 that we've committed to realize in
That's
our FY26 budget process.
That's the word I want to hear.
I was waiting to see which one I was
to
going to
it.
use and hop in if I needed to, Chris. It's not anticipated. We will be saving.
That wasn't on the agenda. Chris would have asked.
To be realized. We said to be.
There
It
we
will
go.
be.
That's
Okay.
right, to be realized.
Just a high level, this is just a reminder, our ESSER funds are expiring. We are, I think, in good position, though, to be able to, we're prepared to move off of ESSER funds and still not see that affect our operating budget significantly this year.
But it does somewhat, right? So you had $500,000 in '24, and then there's the 2 positions you're going to roll in, right? So there's 2 positions that are going to hit us, yeah?
Correct.
Maybe 150, somewhere around there.
Yes, and that is baked into our number, yeah.
Right, got it.
We may have some trickle into FY25 or not. Right now, we're projecting that. We'll see. That potentially covers some of the summer school costs in FY25. So
They're only accessible till September 30th of '24, though, so it will have to be summer, and that's it. We'll have to spend it out.
Are there other grants that are sort of buried in the in the, that are, the budget's net of, that we don't see?
So
These big ones here.
I would say they're not really, I mean, we charge staff directly to the Metco grant. They don't,
right.
so they just go directly to the grant itself.
Right.
The special ed grant, I kind of called that out in the circuit breaker. Those are offsets to out-of-district tuitions. Title I supports a couple tutors. We actually had a little bit more. We had a little bump in funding in '24. It's back down. A bump in '23. It's back down in '24. So it sort of supports about 2 tutors. Title IIA used to support a person, but now we're supporting professional development.
Yeah.
Those are small.
Yeah.
How about the homeless? I think you have a slide. 'Cause
Yeah,
the-
we'll go
Yeah,
through that,
okay.
yeah. I think that's coming up, but these are our uses of ESSER 3 funds, in case folks wanted to see it. We probably presented this before. I'm not going to go through it unless people want me to. So we do have grant funding to support our homeless students. We're grateful for the support from the state. Federal government gives us a small amount. So you can see that out of the 398 we get, almost all of it comes from the state. We get $1,000 per student from the federal government per year, $104 per student per day from the state government, which comes out to a little bit over $18,000. And these are much needed and well-used funds. We use them to support an ELL teacher at Willard, 4 kindergarten instructional assistants, I think all bilingual at Willard, speaking either Spanish or Haitian Creole. Contract services if we need translation or other specific services for students. And then we have a family coordinator who spends time at the shelter, meeting and determining what needs are, and is a great resource to us and to the families. We do anticipate some growth in the grant funding in FY25 based on the current preschool population. The state only, I think the federal government too, only supports K and up. They don't support preschool, and we're seeing that at the shelter there's a fair number of preschool families. So,
I'm at 40 preschoolers over there in grades ages 3 and 4. So what we've done, you've heard the numbers about the ones we've had referrals on and entering into our integrated preschool. What we've done to try to stop gap the supports that they need because they're not subsidized is we've recruited volunteer counselors and educators in the community and put in a makeshift preschool in the play space that's at the hotel. So Monday through Thursday afternoons, right now we're able to service the 4-year-olds. And the room is beautiful, like the donation and the play space is equally outfitted as our preschool classrooms. A little smaller, but otherwise, we've been able to bring most of the preschool 4-year-olds into that setting 4 afternoons a week and start to acclimate them and get them some support. And so the hope is that's going to support those whose needs are, at a different continuum than the ones that are needing special education services, and try to delineate a little bit more, especially because of the lack of subsidy. Can we hold the line without needing another preschool section? That is the question I'm spending time on daily right now, because of the growing needs, both from the shelter and the community in general. So more to come on that.
Why does the state not supplement that? Because it's not
It's just
required
outside of the
Yeah.
K-12 environment. I have spoken over and over again to DESE and et cetera. They refer you over to EEC as early education, part of the state. Early interventions involved. Head Start was an effort we tried. Everybody's sort of pointing the finger at somebody else to get some help, and nothing's come together. So we're continuing to have those conversations at the state level as well. Certainly, we're not the only community seeing the needs at this level and the children that need support.
So the children that are in the preschool are in addition to the 20 or so that are in the regular schools?
Yeah.
Okay.
And growing, I guess, is my asterisk. Yeah.
You're seeing a lot in the preschool?
Yes, and part of that's the demographic of the families that are placed in our shelter, and the kids are young, and they're aging up as they are spending time there. Out of district.
Yeah, and so we've also, in addition to in-district, students can opt to come to school in Concord, or they can opt to go to their home district. We do have some students who've opted to go back to their home district, and we're responsible for 50% of the transportation costs. We split it with the district that they're going to. Those costs are projected around $125,000. We have not budgeted for those. We are partaking in a DESI pilot that will provide us more timely reimbursement that we should be able to, and we anticipate being able to directly offset those transportation costs.
Could I ask, why do they call that a pilot? Is it
Because
temporary?
they've never done it before. What they've used to do was they used to wait till the end of the year, send you a reimbursement in May for your prior fiscal year expenses, and it would go right to general fund revenue. You didn't have access to spend it. It was just almost like going directly to free cash. And Dr. Hunter advocated multiple times, and somebody listened.
Assertively.
Yes.
With the help of Representative Cataldo, for sure.
And so they kind of understood the issue, which is that we have these expenses, given the reimbursement late and not in a way that allows us to apply it to the expenses doesn't help us. So
they're helping with the cash flow problem, essentially, and the reason they're saying pilot is because they don't think they can sustain the earlier reimbursement. So the 22 shelter communities that opened in March and through the spring are the ones that are eligible for the earlier reimbursement, but I don't expect that's going to continue. And honestly, for us, we just needed the jump start, because now that we've got some cash flow, it's not such a big output that we can't manage it. So just really grateful for the response.
We're the largest one in the state, that Best Western, right? So we
Among them. I think Taunton might be the only
It's a little
bigger one,
bigger, yeah, I
but
thought
yes,
we
we
were- I
are
thought we were the top, yeah.
very well established. There's 85 full rooms
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
and then, yeah.
Can I just say, and we are enjoying that community of new residents here in town, very much so. So
I'm
becoming
just saying,
part
we
of
have,
us.
you know,
That's
we
great.
should be
No,
at the
we're-
front of the line, you know.
Yeah, and we've hired a number of folks from there to start working in the schools, and I know that's happening in other places, and the children's growth and the amount of time is just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So it's been really great. We're all benefiting.
Is the facility full?
Yes, it's always full, yes.
And I'm sorry, so is that a permanent solution? These families are gonna stay there for the next 5?
Nobody seems to have the answer to that. As you've probably heard, the state has formally stopped increasing the number of families and have put a cap on the number of rooms, so there's a wait list. They are consolidating some of the small shelters. There's a number of shelters that are unsupported. We're very fortunate to have a service provider there who takes care of basic needs. Other communities are doing that as well as the school impact. I've been assured over and over, no matter what I hear about consolidations, this Concord shelter is not going to close soon. So the lease is up in June with the hotel owner. I think we all expect it will be extended given the significance of the crisis right now.
So the budget risks are, you know, in case if something does happen related to the homeless supporting costs, and there's some change in the way it's supported financially by the state, that's a bit of a risk. And potential growth in the preschool program. We have our contract negotiations this year, and there's some potential for change there. And with the building project, we'll be in a new building in February, but you know, knock on wood, hopefully everything goes smoothly, but there's some potential there. So we just wanted to highlight that, you know, we have the budget, there are things that can happen, and these are what we see as our budget risks. And mindful of time, so
So you've used your 40 minutes.
okay.
We're done.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is a, and I don't want to necessarily get into a capital discussion, but it's really more on the operating side. So when I look at both in the high school and in CPS, in the detail of what's included in your maintenance category, it's all labor, right? So it's all, you know, it's people, it looks like, for the most part, and some contracted services as well. But again, that's labor.
There's a significant dollar amounts for contract services and for supplies and materials, like
Yeah.
if it's actual replacement equipment, we put it to supplies and materials for paying a vendor for their services, contract services.
Okay.
Those are significant chunks of money for both districts.
So would there, so if you're thinking, like, when you think about maintaining the building, not the equipment, sort of the
Yeah.
buildings that you have, how many buildings do you have, Lori? In this-
K
all-
through
the whole thing?
pre-K-8,
The whole
there's
thing.
6, yeah.
6 buildings. So when you think about maintaining those buildings, right, significant investment by the town, how much where is that in the budget?
It's in those lines.
It is?
Anything within a reasonable, and I don't know, tier 1, I guess
No, no,
is.
forget-
Yeah, I know,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna, the things
just
that
the
we can
actual
budget for
cost.
and feel like we can comfortably put in the lines and bring to you, we absolutely do. So regular, ongoing, preventative maintenance is generally there. Anticipated things are in there. Repairs, there's budget for repairs there. So the bulk of the work on the facilities at the lower cost end is all happening in those line items.
Yeah.
Typically, what we bring you in the capital is the bigger ticket items. This year had more that weren't big ticket because of the facility study.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting, and I know we're going to get to this as we all know we need to keep talking about capital, but not only do we carry all the buses in the budget, we carry all our technology there too, which is significant dollars of hardware. So somewhere we'll have to get our, roadmap of what we're putting in what category and talk
I
it
think
through.
it'd be helpful as we go forward, I won't be here, so I'll offer it to the committee, to have a better understanding of what the assets are and how much you're actually spending on keeping them up, right? We have
Right.
this big investment we have on the balance sheet anyway. We have over $100 million in assets in the town. So, but we don't sort of focus on, this is how much we're actually putting into them to keep them up to date. That would be helpful, I think, to the committee at some point.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Colin?
Bob, you mentioned the facilities study. Do you know when that's going to be finished?
I don't have an exact date, but the spring of 2024, I don't know if it's March or April. There'll be an initial presentation and we'll have some feedback to them, but it's going to be before we get into next year.
Before town meeting?
No, well, it might be, but I don't think we're going to try to react to like data that we're just getting in April and right, like 2 weeks before town meeting.
Does it cover the high school too?
No. I mean, I don't think it's worth paying for the high school right now. The building's, it's not quite old enough to, I think, be worthwhile.
I think we're expecting to do that at the 10-year mark, which is 2025. So it's a couple years out that we'll probably start to do some big picture work, looking at the high school to make sure we're staying ahead of things.
It's that same question of, how much are we paying, what does it cost us to keep the buildings in good shape?
I mean, the high school's easy, right? The
Yeah.
budget's right there, and you can see
Yeah.
the lines are what we're using to support maintenance and
But it's all late, like, I
repairs.
can't figure out if it's just it's people who are doing custodial stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to read the lines, I guess.
Yeah, there's maintenance lines and there's building service lines. The building service lines are our custodial teams.
Yeah.
The maintenance lines are our actual maintenance staff.
Yeah.
The facilities director and assistant director of
Right.
facilities.
Right.
I mean, I can do something.
They do some things
offline as part of
in-house,
the-
and then
Yeah.
the rest of it's in the contract service line
Okay.
about when we work with vendors.
Okay.
I would say we felt a little bit more pressure in the high school budget than CPS, where we've seen like the building starting to have more replacement costs, more maintenance costs than maybe it did a couple years ago.
High
So,
school.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you can see it
Yeah.
yeah. That's what sort of drew the question was, well, gee, I don't know. I don't really get a sense of how much we spend on actually, keeping the buildings up. We have this large investment in them, and, we do, you see the major refurbs, and like when you replace a boiler, and so, we see those.
Yeah.
But the other upkeep, I don't,
Yeah, we can certainly give you more detailed, but the budgets we bring are meant to be preventative maintenance and some repairs as they come up, because we take very seriously the care and well-being of the buildings. So we can bring you more detail for
Yeah, it
sure.
would be useful to have a framework so that we could understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, before you move on to the high school, what about revenue from user fees, the rental fees? You shared some numbers, I think it was in October, showing that those numbers, they've been small consistently, but they were steady, and then they dropped significantly in the last year. One, why did that happen? And two, are those baked into your budget for 25?
So those are for the high school only. The town right now, we're not receiving the revenue. So that's something I want to bring forward at some point to look at. We get offsets for our facility staff, basically if they have to work, but the actual rental itself, we receive the checks and record it, but it goes to miscellaneous revenue, which goes to the town.
Which at the K-5 and middle school are very small right now.
Right.
A new middle school might change that. But right now, the money's not coming to the schools.
I thought we had a schedule that showed CPS and the high school. Maybe it's just,
We gave you the amounts.
okay, but it goes
Yeah.
to the
We just
town.
don't actually get the
Yeah.
dollars.
But it was,
Might be a discussion for
yeah.
down.
We created a facilities rental revolving fund for the high school
Yeah.
sometime in the past 6 months. I think it makes sense to do that for the middle school. It is work for, like, so we have a company filming at the middle school right now, a movie, I think Concord
really?
Academy, and so.
Yeah, Concord Academy, there's a nostalgic draw to the Sanborn building that's happened a couple times this year. So Concord Academy's coming over and filming there every week right now for their project, yeah.
So I think for the pain that they go through to make that happen, they feel like they would like to have
Yeah.
that to offset some of their building maintenance costs. So-
Don't get me wrong, I'm relieved to not have a nostalgic building for people to film in anymore, but,
It's not a historic structure.
yeah, it's the third, we've had 3 asks in the last year.
So should I shift over to the
Yeah.
presentation? Let me get out of this.
I can kick off, at least switching presentations. We'll skip to the enrollments. I think we've talked on the process. We're finally getting a little much anticipated breathing space at the high school, so you'll see the enrollments are down some, and we've been holding out for that to happen, and we're finally here. We had some larger classes come up through, and we're finally through them, and it's really been important to have that offset, to have a little bit of the less overcrowding and a little bit of free space here and there along the way, where these prior years in the high school has just been jam-packed and absolutely nothing flexible or available.
What is the capacity?
So I think we're right at about the capacity at 1,200, 1,250. We've been well over 1,300. MSBA purposely builds buildings almost over capacity because and I admit this was in my time, I was in a community that overbuilt significantly because projections were off, and so MSBA really tightened up on that. So we'd known that we were going to be really tight, and then we anticipated the relief, and we're finally seeing it. Now, when I say relief, are there large-scale open classrooms around the high school? Absolutely not. It just finally means that not every square inch is being used for regular classroom purposes, and we get a little bit more option to find, use space for other reasons, or to add a section when we need to. We'd actually been limited by space at different points about, class size and sections and things like that, so.
So when we start building this MBTA multifamily housing, where are they sitting?
Yeah, so we're going to expect that, we're going to have section sizes go up some. Are we going to get all the way to the number where we felt so tight? I can't predict that, right? I think we're all anxious to have some housing options in town, knowing that we're going to have to offset the enrollment needs that come along. The high school, we can make it work. We've been making it work. I think it's important that we all stay open to the conversation and figure it out together, right?
Yeah,
Because it's not just MBTA, it's the other 2 projects that seem on track to go forward. So we're paying close attention, for sure.
Yeah, because this Best Western is 85 units, you said, right?
Yeah.
And you're already out of capacity at the preschool level.
Yeah, and it all depends on the demographic of who moves in, right? The Best Western doesn't have that many families with older children, and most of them have decided to go back to their school of origin. So that dynamic is not really impacting the high school at all, but a whole different demographic might shift the emphasis somewhere else. So it's hard to predict exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to drive through this one. I'm going to skip through the first couple slides because you've seen them. Our enrollment. per pupil expenditure, the same budget objectives. And I'll jump to our summary. So we're up 3.37%. This is our expenditure, our operating budget over FY24. You can see kind of the key drivers here. Maintenance and fixed assets are two. Fixed assets on a dollar basis is fairly small. And other school services. So I'll go into these in detail. The administration costs, again, it's Mosul is driving the software costs, and administrative salaries on a percentage basis, 3.6%. Overall, 4.6% over FY24. Teaching and instructional support is up 2% over the FY24 budget. There is some staffing adjustments. We have a teacher that we were able to get half of them into they had been ESSER funded. We shifted half of them into the operating budget. In FY25, they're going to be fully in the operating budget. The teacher's still here and has been here before. It's just, this is the sunsetting of ESSER funding's impact. And then you can see, kind of the zero-based approach. We have, I think that's a net quarter reduction, but, we look at what our needs are across all subjects, and based on our sections, we develop our budget now. We're probably going to have some shifts that happen as the schedule's built and students sign up for classes. This mostly reflects the changes that happened after we built our FY24 budget, and then schedules came out for this school year. So.
Okay, so now I can ask my question on the teaching. So the $500,000 in underspending in '23, was that attributable to this line? Is it because of attrition, or what caused that?
So it wasn't underspending. It was technology. We're talking about the technology costs, where we had $400,000 of funding. We typically hold our technology spending until the end of the year. What we had been doing the past 2 years, we had been able to bank and save some money during the
prepaid kind of
COVID years.
thing, yeah.
Our technology cost of $400,000 was spent all in June for our upcoming school year's needs. So we were kind of doing it a year in advance, give us a safety net. We had to use that and reallocate it to the CCH Access Road project.
Oh, okay.
So now we're hand to mouth.
So that's the accounting, so that's how it
Yeah.
showed up?
Yeah, it wasn't really a savings. We would have
get it.
spent it for
I get
technology.
it. Okay.
But we just waited till July 1st to spend our technology
Okay,
money.
I understand. Thank you.
And there's some non-teacher staffing changes there as well. We added this assistant principal last year to, based on looking at our staffing relative to student body and other high schools. So we have 2 co-principals and 2 assistant principals now. And our special ed instructional assistants, kind of looking at what our needs were, we determined that we could decrease by 3. Also in teaching and instructional support, kind of the non-salary items, we have students, we want to provide a pathway for all students to be able to take calculus by their senior year. And the calculus project is a big part of that. It's a statewide or broader initiative, national?
No, it's a nonprofit that we sign up to participate with.
And so we haven't fully funded it in the budget in the past. We had some grant funding at one point. We've had to find offsets for it. This basically funds it in our budget on a going forward basis. And it's one of the key drivers for the increase there. We had cut back professional development stipends and during in an effort to kind of moderate our budget last year, we looked at what our needs were and basically had to increase that. That includes like summer curriculum development work and includes work they do during the school year. And then our special ed contract services increased 18,000. The other items here are the supplies. I'm going to skip over that one. That's relatively minor. The Cartwheel mental health software, it's not really software. It's mental health services that students can access directly. people have a challenge. It's been very challenging for people to access mental health services. Sometimes providers just aren't taking on additional clients. So this is a service where they can access that directly through this third-party company. We have license for 50 students?
50 seats.
50 seats at one point in time. So students, if someone cycled off, another could cycle on. So this provides them access to support and also potentially to get connected to services, but they can also get direct services through this provider.
We literally can match a child with a therapist pretty quickly at this point because we have full autonomy now for short term, and then if they need longer term, that therapist will help to set that up. But pretty game changing for us. Yeah.
Okay. Other school services are up 15.8%. The key drivers there are an FTE for an athletic trainer to meet the needs, and the requirements of what we're supposed to provide for per MIAA.
What is that?
The Mass
Interscholastic Athletic Association.
They set some minimums?
They do set some expectations of when the trainer will be present, and especially in the contact sports. So our trainer's been trying to be in too many places at once. Away games, especially football, they have to travel with the team. So there's just a high level of expectation and compliance issue there that we were really struggling with, so we needed to add someone. And the other part is the schedules have really drawn out. They're really struggling for officials. So it's not a Monday through Friday athletic week anymore. It trickles all the way into the weekend. So our people are working 7 days a week and still coming up short. It just wasn't working, so.
Our special ed transportation costs are up significantly. Part of that is not just the cost, it's also the, we are part of Case Collaborative that provides our transportation. They've had operating surpluses that get returned to us. Some of those surpluses have declined through a little bit more, part of it's accurate budgeting, part of it's cost increases to attract drivers. So part of this is the surplus going away, part of this is an actual cost increase. So the surpluses come to us as an offset to our budget, but we're seeing that decline. We also have regular ed transportation up. That includes driver salaries, that includes supplies and some services. We do contract out some small number of athletic runs when we have a lot of activities at a given point in time that can't be supported by the team. But typically we do almost the vast majority in-house. Our coaches' salaries are up. We've added a couple unified teams for special education students, co-ed teams. In addition, we've added a couple sports. I think one of them is a volleyball sport. I don't remember the other one, but we've added a couple teams based on student interest. And there's a couple other items here. Co-curricular salaries includes all the student clubs and activities. And the supplies includes some funding for to be applied towards Q5. It's an activity that we do at the end of the school year.
Are there balances in the revolving accounts or
there's some
boosters or whatever that could help pay for some of this?
We're very well supported by the booster clubs for all the different sports. They will take on the cost of many assistant coaches and a good amount of material and equipment needs.
Yeah.
So that, plus the kids are paying fees of $300. So there's multiple pieces of revenue, and we try to match it all together to only bring to the budget what we need to.
You think you can ask for more or no?
We just had a little bit of this conversation. We raised it 5 years ago by $100, and I, at the time, thought that was a 10-year change. That's a lot of money for families and multiple children in a family. It really did hit them hard. So I think I'm not particularly bringing that as an initiative. The committees behind me may want to talk differently, but that won't be my recommendation.
Maintenance and operations is up. So the electricity is a big driver there. And so I looked at the last 2 years, FY22, FY23. Our budget had been in the range of 330. Our run rates were well above that the past 2 years. Some of that was a spike for energy shortages with Ukraine situation.
You mean a rate increase?
Yeah, there was also a temporary surcharge by CMLP.
There was, yep.
So the temporary surcharge has gone away. So what I budgeted is actually a slight decline from what we spent on utilities in FY '23. So it's a slight decline. I looked at our kilowatt hour usage and factored in what I saw what our current rates are. And this is more of an issue of just we didn't budget enough in previous years.
I said before Bob arrived, we had been under budgeting and running over. So I think we're just trying to land the middle ground here and really watch the run rates to get it as accurate as possible.
Colin?
Bob, on electricity, there's going to be a proposal at town meeting offered by the light plant to put solar panels on top of the high school. Have you considered if that warrant article goes through and if the $8.9 million is awarded, one of the items is to put solar panels on the high school, will that impact your electricity budget?
If there,
Can I answer that? Because I was
sure.
with a meeting with Dave a week ago. It's a discussion as to what kind of MOU we'd have with CMLP. Where now we get a small amount off at Willard because of the very few solar panels there. It would have to be a whole process to figure out. Right now at the middle school, we're not going to see direct savings of the solar. It's all going to go to the grid and then we'll be charged. So it's an ongoing conversation between the schools and CMLP.
The maintenance and building service labor costs are up 3.6. Contract services and supplies are the two areas I mentioned where we've seen that we're needing to spend more to repair some things. And that's a combination of vendors' work and materials that we need to replace things.
What's the total line item for that one, Bob? That's what you were talking to, maintenance. Is that what you were saying in the repair land?
Yeah, to maintenance and operations.
Yeah.
It's up 225. You want me to flip back to the?
I was just curious, no, that maintenance contracted services, that line, how big is that number? Not the change, but the actual budget amount for 25.
I can get you that. I can
Okay,
also probably.
keep going, that's fine.
23 divided by 15.3.
Okay, I can do that, yep.
Come on.
All you mathematicians in the room.
Calculus, right?
Yeah. But yeah, there's a specific line. I can email you the line item, tell you which line it is.
No problem, go ahead.
Fixed charges is our insurance, benefits, workers' comp, all of our insurances in the region. We absorb those costs. So you can see what our key drivers are. We do have some offsets. The active employees is up a little bit more. The retirees is actually offsetting it a bit, but net our insurance is up 6% for the medical insurance. Workers' comp is up significantly. We had a large claim, and we got put into the uninsured pool and had to get placed with a company. We just worked with Maya to get placed with a AIM insurance, so we're now back working with the carrier directly, and we brought our prices down, but this $55,000 does represent the price that we're going to be paying now. We actually had a higher number last year. So we've made progress. We don't have any claims for workers' comp, knock on wood, in the region the last 2 years, so we're hoping that experience helps moderate this in future years, or at least keeps it level. The large reductions, I just wanted to point out, we have the same sick leave buyback reduction in early retirement program ending. The OPEB contribution was previously $550,000 in our budget. We've cut it to $425,000. I think I have another slide on this later, but our consultant says that funding at $425,000 for 5 years will essentially fully fund our OPEB trust, which is going to be great news down the line.
And that was the original goal, 30/30?
I wasn't here for it. I don't know, but
I think we're ahead of the goal. I thought it was a little further into the 2030.
Is it later?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, the previous audit had a funding schedule that went another 10 years out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
And just, I think worth noting, just because I remind you, these are all in guideline in the high school budget and not in the town budget. So just when you're doing apples to apples, it isn't exactly apples to apples. This whole workers' comp, insurance, all of it is in guideline for us.
We need to replace the computer lab hardware that's about 10 years old, and that's the sole driver of the increase for fixed assets. And then our debt service is down 93,000 or 2.3% from FY24. This includes us rolling in the Access Road bond anticipation note. In year 1 and year 2, we're doing just interest. At the same time, we're doing just interest on that. We are paying off the landfill bond anticipation note by the end of 2 years. That will be paid off, and we'll start paying principal on the, we'll have required principal paydowns on the access bond anticipation note. So they're kind of slated time-wise to keep the debt service gradually decreasing. And that's actually on one of the handouts I have. You can see the debt service projections. And then the existing bonds, you know, the question, why is it decreasing? I think the town may do this as well for its debt, but our existing bonds related to the high school project, they're level principal. So as we pay down the principal, our interest payments decline. So that's why our debt service is decreasing. Out-of-district tuitions, again, like the CPS are down 70,000. This is a combination, or actually gross tuition costs are down even more. They're down 174,000 or 4.69%. We've had a little bit of a decrease in our offsets. Circuit breaker funding we had budgeted to use 100,000 of current year circuit breaker funds. This year we're using just the prior year carryover. We're trying to best practice is to carry over a full year of circuit breaker funds. We're trying to get back to that. We declined a little bit last year. So because of those offsets, the net out-of-district tuition number is down 70,000, while the gross is 174. The charter school assessment is here too. I think that was an increase from 2 to 3 students or 1 to 2 students. Students can opt to attend charter schools and they get charged to the regional district. Just a high-level view of what's driving it. It's more non-salary in this budget, unlike CPS. These are our grants. We do project for this district that all of the ESSER funds will be used by the end of the year. These were the uses here of the ESSER funds. That last number is a required contribution. Whenever you use staff that's MTRS eligible on a federal grant, you are required by the state of Massachusetts to make an extra contribution to MTRS.
That's the pension?
Yeah. Even though the employees are already contributing to it.
We don't totally understand it, but we follow the rules.
And so our students that, supporting our students from the shelter, we have fewer here in district. In general, there's fewer that are older, but so our grant funding is 74,000, 70,000 from the state, 4,000. What we're using these to support are the family coordinator, liaison, some contract services, and an instructional assistant. Our transportation costs are projected to run around 118,000. Not all of those are related to the Concord shelter. We do have another student that's going to their home district. And is not residing at the shelter. So the pilot here, we're also, with this pilot, anticipating that we can offset that this year by getting some funds directly from the state that can be applied toward these costs. So these are not budgeted. Our OPEB, this other post-employment benefits, is essentially medical benefits for our retirees. Be familiar with, basically what we're trying to do is to fund this so we're not paying for this out of our operating budget. Our trust value, we had positive investment performance last year, so it's brought our trust value up to 8.6 million. Our liability is 16.5 million. So we're at a 52% funding level. And our actuary has projected, with the disclaimer that it's subject to market returns, that level contributions of $425,000 for the next 5 years, during which time we don't actually dip into the trust, that we continue to pay as we go for retiree benefits, that we should be fully funded. So that's a conversation we look forward to when we get to and what that means.
Do you know what discount rate they're assuming in there
I believe it's 7% or 6.5%.
for long-term interest?
Mm-hmm.
And so you saw, I guess we see it more in your operating budget, you saw a lot of interest income, I think, this year.
Yes.
And do you do some projections on what you're going to earn on that? Do you know what you're using for an interest rate for next year, for '25?
On the trust or?
Well, no, on
Yeah.
on your excess funds, wherever you're.
Oh, I mean, for our interest income? I use our run rate interest. I've tempered it a little bit because we're going to have a little bit lower cash levels.
Okay.
But basically, I modeled it based off of our run rate. We're getting about 4%. We don't invest all of it in that high number.
Yeah.
Some of it needs to be more liquid and accessible
Right.
quickly.
Yeah. Well, it looks like rates might be coming down, so, okay.
So these are the revenue sources, so the kind of moving on from the expense side, our revenue sources. Chapter 78, actually, we got a little bit of bump last year, not a ton, but so we're projecting a 2.7% increase over the '24 budget. Chapter 71A, there was a lot of talk about a very high reimbursement number that didn't materialize, so I've brought that back in line with what we received in FY '23. So that's a 6.3% decrease. Our interest income, we've kind of been behind the growth of the interest rates, and as they took off, our budget hadn't caught up with it. We hope that they stay where they are, or if they stay relatively level. But we haven't kind of jumped up and fully assumed all of that is going to be realized. And then the rental income, we're still realizing, but it's getting directed to a facilities revolving fund. That facilities revolving fund, we could apply directly to repairs, maintenance costs. In theory, we could probably apply it to utilities too, but so that's coming out of general fund revenue, and it's going to be used to, we'll apply it towards our facilities needs.
Yeah, you're just reclassifying it somewhere, right?
We are, yeah.
Well, wouldn't it go up? I mean, didn't you guys just redo the rate schedule, or
Well,
whatever?
the gross revenue we receive would go up.
Yeah.
But it just won't go into this account anymore.
No, she's asking because of the fee adjustments. It's all based on usage and what people have logged on to use. And actually, we know one summer camp that has been at the high school for a long time was very careful in what they asked for to use because of the significant increase of the rate. So, there's pros and cons to rate increases. Consumers have to make their money go so far.
Yeah. And at CPS, even though I know you don't get the revenue, but there's no real growth there in the rental.
No, those facilities are not full-size gymnasiums, so
Yeah.
they're not that appealing. There's just much less need,
Yeah.
much less drive to use it, which is why the middle school gym will probably pick up some significant usage, as was the vision.
So do we have any revenue assumptions for the middle school in our?
We don't at this point.
But in
Certainly, we
26
know
or
how
9.
engaged the youth sports teams and
Yeah.
leaders were in the project, so I expect they're going to be very active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but maybe more in '26?
Yeah, I'll be honest, thinking of community use in February and
Yeah.
spring of '25 is a little overwhelming as we get settled in.
Okay.
Just saying.
And a lot of the town groups, we don't charge town rec. So there are users that access them for free.
They're free?
Yes.
Oh,
Well, because they're the town.
Yeah.
So it would all just be moving
All the
money
same
around,
money.
so.
So the net is 4.6% up on revenue. And the E&D, we level funded at $300,000. Just a look at what the assessment piece is here. It's a little bit of an eye chart,
I
but
have a question, please.
Yeah.
A little more detail on the E and D. It's $300,000, what you're contributing now. What's the cap?
I have another, I have a slide on that coming up, yep. Could have reordered them, but I didn't. So this just runs down at the top, our expense budget, deducts the revenue sources and the use of E&D to what the assessment is for the towns, and compared to last year. And so you can see that the 3.2% is what our overall budget is increasing in terms of an assessment. It's a little bit less than the 3.37% expense increase because of the favorable revenues. Concord's share is up 3.42%. Carlisle's is 2.51%. That's because there was a slight increase in the percentage to Concord year over year. It went from 76.26 to 76.42. And then we've been asked to show what would the assessment look like with and without debt. So this shows you at the top, if you don't factor in the debt, what the increase is, and at the bottom with the debt.
Without the debt is what's relevant to guidelines.
And this just shows you the enrollment-driven change, that orange highlighted number. So, the impact to Concord is relatively moderate because of your larger base. It's a 0.22% increase. So you go from 3.2 to 3.42, about $55,000. And for Carlisle on the smaller base, that's a 0.7% reduction in the same dollars. And again, that's just driven with that change in students that's shown up there.
So, and I asked Bob to pull this out because Concord hasn't seen any increase based on the enrollments in a few years. And whenever the last time that was, we really tried to have discussions about this assessment shift impact not really necessarily being in guideline, because there's nothing, this is just number of kids in the seats. It's not an operational cost, it's just literally because of how many children you have. So in the years that it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, if it had been in guideline, I would have been making major cuts. So I just wanted to start getting us all back into that discussion a little bit again. This year, it's a pretty minor number. It's 55,000. But other years, and certainly Carlisle has had very significant increases because of this enrollment piece the last couple of years, and been, having to adjust and manage for that. So just wanted to start remembering how we were doing this before when Concord was seeing increases because of enrollment.
I don't know that it was outside of guidelines. What we did, Lori, is we took it first. We sort of said, we're going to set this amount aside and say, give them this, and then we're going to talk about what they need.
At least you segregated the congregations.
We recognize it as a sort of a non-negotiable. They should get at least this much because of
thank you.
X,
That's a
Y, Z.
good clarification.
And then to your question on E&D, so we're limited to 5% of the operating and capital budget. That's the cap. So our cap would be just under 1.9 million. Our certified E&D balance is shown here. What we then do is add how much we were favorable on revenues. Our remaining expenditure balance, we essentially spent our whole budget, so there's not much there in expenditures. That's net of encumbrances too, if those are factored in. And then we deduct our budgeted E&D usage as an offset. So with that, we're projecting will be $1,847,000. It's about 98% of the cap, and that's why we felt like we should keep budgeting $300,000 for E&D usage when we're that close to the cap.
And that's the 495 that I keep asking about, that you were saying is related to the technology. That's what I keep talking about.
Oh, this 495 is revenues. Okay, I thought you were talking about expenses. So the revenues, about 300,000 of that is interest income.
Okay.
We have one-time funds from EDCO dissolution. They had money left afterwards that they resent to us. We do have some of the rental income. There was another one-time item, I think, related to return of workers' comp premiums, that it was from a prior year, so you can't offset expenses. You have to take it as revenue. So those were kind of, that was about 38,000. So those are the big items. That probably gets us a little bit over 4.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
And that we're not going to see 495 next year, so. So that's what we have for our regional presentation.
Colin?
Probably asking too many questions. What I didn't see in this presentation was the delta between our FinCom guidelines and your budgets for both CPS and the regional district. Do you know what those numbers are?
We happen to know what they are. Yeah, it's about 87,000 at CPS and 204,000 at the region.
So Lori, that's a reversal from the recent past, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Why is that?
I think at CPS, we were able to really do some work on realizing some offsets to salaries, frankly. That's the big driver. That special ed,
Yeah.
300,000 was significant. Some of the staffing things I've mentioned to you are significant. So there are some ways to mitigate that we haven't had in the past. And then at the high school, I think some of the changes are, well, one, the assessments shifted back to Concord just a little bit. I think some of the other pieces there are non-instructional and non-teaching. The electricity adjustment to get that actually on track was a significant one. Workers' comp, insurance, like all that added up to another bit of
Yeah, 'cause
a
we
bit
don't
of
usually see
impact.
that. We don't usually see a 4% increase coming out of the high school.
Yeah, not in a while.
Yeah.
Not in a while. Yep.
So, I'm sorry, CPS is 87,000 over guideline,
Yep.
and the high school was?
204. Yeah. I think one thing we're really watching at the high school going forward, you notice the special education out-of-district numbers are significantly different. So as kids are aging out and graduating, I think we'll start to see some decline there. Or we're bringing them back. We certainly are doing that too. But that's one place I think will be a benefit to the high school budget going forward.
Because you can track that through the middle school.
Yes, and in fact, the reason the numbers are larger at the high school is because the programs weren't in place when those kids were young, and they went out and they are generally still out. So more to come on that.
13 students out of district at CPS out of 1,800, which is phenomenally low relative to other districts. And the high school's a little smaller, and I think we have about 33 out of district.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Don?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but last year in your operating budget, you had something like $300,000 for buses, for new buses? Is that correct?
That's in the fixed asset portion of the budget, but that was level year over year, so I didn't really call it out. But that's budgeted the same as last year.
Okay. So earlier you mentioned that you lease buses.
We do. Yeah.
Oh, I was confused about that.
Go ahead.
That's the lease cost. So
Yeah.
the number that's in there is our lease cost.
But it was, the line item I'm remembering was to replace some buses because of their age.
So the line item always carries the current lease costs and allows for a new lease of 2 buses at each district, so that we're always replacing. So we have to carry the lease costs that we still have
Yep.
obligations to,
Yep.
but there's always a slot there for 2 more buses at each district to keep
I
the
think they
fleet
lease to
fresh.
buy.
We lease to buy,
Yeah.
yeah.
We own it after 5 years.
Yeah.
Are they capital leases or operating leases? How do you trade them? You don't know? I think they're probably operating leases, so they seem short. I don't remember. What's it,
Yeah,
is it
they're
8 years?
5,
Five
right?
leases.
They're 5, yeah.
They're 5?
They have to be.
5-year
They
leases,
would
5
be?
years, yeah.
Well, if you're going to buy them, I
Yeah.
guess it would be, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, any last questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Our next agenda item is public comment. Would anybody in attendance in the room like to share comments?
I'm going to share. Hi, Tracy Morano, 39 Purchase Lane.
Come up to the
Microphone.
Tracy Morano, 39 Partridge Lane, Chair of the Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee. Thanks for having us tonight. I just wanted to thank Dr. Hunter and Bob. This is another night out this week. We've definitely been in budget season, and thank you for your cooperation. I just wanted to make one comment regarding athletic fees, but I'm going to speak on behalf of myself as a parent. So that $300 fee really isn't just $300. And anyone who has had someone play a sport at the high school knows that there are other costs associated with that. So parents are really paying, I would say on average, between $500 to $1,000 a sport, and you're paying for donations to the Friends of Boosters organizations. That helps fund the coaches. And you're also paying equipment, you're paying for kids that might not have the money to afford the merchandise. So there are other costs associated with sports other than just that user fee. So I just wanted to say that as a parent only. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else in the room? Okay, anyone on Zoom? I see one person with her hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, Jean Goldsberry, 1832 Main Street. I just want to comment that the budget does not seem to have any funds in it for the construction of safety barriers for Junction Park. And the plan was to put some temporary things in place, but then also to put in a permanent plan to keep the bikes and the pedestrians separated so that there's not a safety issue at that park.
This is a school budget.
And I am also the chair of the Commission on Disabilities. We've been highly involved in this, and we're very concerned.
Colin?
Jean, it's Carlin. Tonight's presentation was just the school budget. I think what you're talking about is a town budget issue. And Eric, the town budget is going to be coming back at our January 18 meeting, is that right?
That's right. We'll take this to look into as an action item.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm so sorry I misunderstood, and I missed the very beginning of the meeting. So thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else on Zoom? Okay. Moving on to our next item, update on follow-up items. So Parashar is not in attendance tonight, but he did share a few items that he's tracking that I'll quickly run through. I'm reading from my phone here. The first is looking into additional inserts to property tax or utility bills. That's something that Dee volunteered to work on, and she said she'll have a draft insert ready by the end of next week. So that work on that is underway. Second item, develop brief descriptions of capital plan tiers and guidelines. That's something Parasha himself is working on, and he hopes to send it out before the end of the year. Third item is the Finance Committee website. The new organization and format are looking good. Parasha is tracking a few additional items to upload. And then lastly, this is an item for the finance department. We had been tracking funds returned by the schools for fiscal year 2023, and we are seeking a status report on that, that figure. Do you have any updates on that, Anthony?
So right now, they're still carrying over an encumbrance of about somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000. So once they clean out their encumbrances, then we'll know what the bottom line will be.
Okay, thank you. So there's a follow-up items. Next, liaison updates. We'll quickly go around the room, starting this way. If anybody has any updates,
Nope.
please share.
I do not.
Kathy?
As it relates to housing, there was a roundtable last week covering all of the outstanding projects and the allocations. I think the most significant item for us is the new taxes that can be put in both on the buyer's transaction and the seller's transaction. So from our standpoint, the affordable housing trusts should not need funding from our sources. They'll be getting funding from other sources.
Those things were up in the legislature, though. They've been there for a couple of years. Did they have progress on them? Or?
They've been passed. There's some, I lost the slide. There's some estimates of the revenue that we can generate of about $1.5 million. That's just on the buyer side, and now there's a new regulation on the seller side.
We were requesting twice for home rule petition. Yeah, there were two, both sides we had requested, yeah.
Right.
That still has to go to town meeting, though. We just voted.
No, we're just saying the town, the state. We
Yeah,
had to,
at the
the
state
state had to have,
Enabled it. State enabled it,
right,
Yeah.
right. I know the town still has to do their thing, but we were waiting for the ability to move forward.
We voted to ask this.
We voted for home rule petition, right, a request, yeah.
We
And now it's been,
approved.
has it been
Now
granted now? Has the home rule?
Like-
We've been
I
waiting.
hadn't heard that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Did it just come out of committee? Was it approved by the House, by the Senate? Was it signed by the governor? What phase are we in?
Yeah, well, I didn't know, yeah.
I don't think it's 100%, but I don't know. I didn't watch the roundtable.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah, maybe an update next
Yeah,
time.
maybe you could find out exactly what stage they're in.
Thank you. Lindsay. Colin.
Yes. Two things. One, the Recreation Commission is going to be meeting on the 18th, and, no, actually on the 19th, take that back. And we're going to be reviewing the new draft Recreation Strategic Plan that just came out. This is the second version. It's about 80 pages long. I just kind of skimmed through it, and my initial take on it is, one, the font is pale, it's hard to read. It's light blue on light blue paper. The executive summary needs more specificity in the short-term, midterm, and long-term goals. Much of the focus of the recreation strategic plan is water-based recreation, and there's not much information about our extensive trail system. And the section on the Doug White fields, which I'm kind of sensitive about, is really shallow. There's not much information about it. Also, there are very few cost projections for this plan, and no mention about how the Recreation Revolving Fund is going to be used to cover some of the requested capital and operating improvements. Now, I think that's one thing that the Recreation Commission is going to be looking at their meeting, but I'm not sure. The other thing I did was watch the water forum that was on December 5, and they had two really interesting warrant articles coming out of it. One is to improve Nagog Pond filtration system. They're going to seek a bond authorization of about $50 million that's supposed to cover about a 5-year period of time. So basically, as I understand, come once to town meeting, get this passed, and over the next 5 years, be able to spend up to $50 million as part of a phased implementation process to improve the water connections that we have. And the other thing that was also in this December 5 forum, which now is online on video, is creating a stormwater enterprise fund. This is something new. We have other types of enterprise funds, but it's new. They're going to be looking at setting up a bylaw, a structure at this town meeting, and then next year setting up the actual fund, the actual dollar amount. Who's going to be assessed, how that's going to be calculated, what an equivalent residential unit, an ERU is, which is the basis for the calculation. And apparently the rates are going to be based on the actual cost for stormwater management. So it's not going to be based on anything, but it's going to be based on how much impervious surface you have, basically. So those are two things that are coming out. They're both enterprise funds, but I know we have a hearing on March 21 for the enterprise stuff, so they will come to us at those point. If you're looking for the water forum, you'll see two links. One is the major link. Down below it, you'll see an alternate link. That's because they had to revise the video. And then click that, and then towards the end of it, when they start talking about the stormwater section, you might want to slow down the playback speed, because it's really fast. That's about how quick it is. But if you slow it down to 0.75, I used to be able to do that in dictation, it would drive people crazy. If you slow it down to 0.75, you can understand what the Stormwater Enterprise Fund is about. That's it.
Thanks. Peggy? Don?
No.
Greg?
No.
Quasi?
No.
And Suresh?
No.
Okay, and I know Amrith had to leave. Okay, next item, minutes. I don't believe we have any minutes to approve, none in the packet. Next, correspondence. Any correspondence to discuss?
Two letters inside the packet that you received. The first letter is from Chair Henry Dane of the Select Board So it was a letter to both chairs and the superintendent of CPSC and CCRSD, and then also their response to the chair. Both of those letters are in your packet.
Okay. And just to quickly summarize, so the letter from the chair of the select board to the school committees was seeking a deeper understanding of capital spending plans. And the response, that was sent on December the 8th. The response on December the 11th was that for CPS, the fiscal year 25 capital plan falls entirely within Tier 1 under that 25,000K threshold. And they ask, they state they'd be willing to incorporate these items into their operating budget, provided that the finance committee revisit their guideline to factor in these expenses. Discussion on that.
One thing that maybe I should have asked tonight is just how do they decide what goes in this article versus what stays in the operating budget? Since it seems like a lot of kind of tier 1 type maintenance is in the operating budget too.
It isn't typically, but this year it was. So normally you see like boiler
Okay.
replacements, you see, if you go back and look historically at that warrant article, it's normally large items.
Okay.
But
So
this
this
year,
year
because
it's just
they're-
a mix.
Well, I think this year because they're waiting to do they're waiting for the results of that capital plan study they're doing. I think they held off, also in the last 2 years, they've also had some conversation with the town around sustainability. So there was some discussion around the type of boilers that they would use and electric buses and so forth. So I think, I can't speak for them obviously, but I think
She
they held
ends,
off.
she ends the letter by saying that they're waiting for the study, which will come out in the spring of 2024.
But also, the thing in the letter, and I didn't go back and try, so they only listed a couple of things there. It wasn't the whole 900,000.
No.
What happened to the rest of the items?
Please.
Oh, that would be great,
Please.
that would be great.
If you'd like to
I didn't
join
know
us.
you were still here.
Okay, I'm going to do the best I can. My preference is the region. So our capital plan is out there. We have a $900,000 capital plan. The things that Alexa called out here in this section, those are the things that were under the $25,000 threshold. But you should have a copy of our
Yeah,
capital
we do,
plan.
from
Yeah.
before.
So all that 900,000 is on there. But I
So there's
think
some of it that isn't, oh, yeah, what
there are a
is she
few
using
things
as a
that are
limit?
under the 25,000.
Oh, 25 is for capitalization, but Tier 1 goes up to 250.
So the entire capital plan is tier 1.
Is Tier 1. And so what's the
And we've done
distinction
it
of the
this way,
25,000?
it's been done this way, to
Yes.
my knowledge, for probably decades. Peggy, you could probably help me on that one. But I think that it's
Well, you
been-
haven't classified it, but most of the
Right.
items were typically larger. That's what's
Yes, and we're
unusual
waiting
about
for the
them.
facility study, which will
Yeah.
be done in the spring, so that we can extend out on there. And then in terms of the region, it really is just that amenities building
Yeah.
that we're submitting a warrant article on.
Great.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
That's 103,000.
Well, so Anthony, what's the significance of the 25,000? Is that the capitalization? What does that come into the picture for?
That was the bottom line threshold for tier 1.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I thought when I looked at their list, everything was in Tier 1. But there's some amounts that are less than the amount for Tier 1?
I think they pointed out a couple, there was 15,000, just like the town we
Okay.
had, from the town.
So there's a couple that could be within what they would call within the operating budget?
Yes.
Oh, I see. And how much did that add up to?
103.
103. Okay. Great. So what they haven't requested, they didn't put it in their budget, but they would, that's what they're saying, I guess, yeah?
If we change.
If we change the guideline.
Got a question online.
Eric, Eric,
Mary?
can I? Yeah, I want to, Mary Hartman, a member of the select board, speaking on my own behalf. This is a letter that was sent from the select board to the chairs of the school committee. The meeting on in February, I think, is still on our agenda. I'm glad the finance committee is aware of this. I think when we talk again in February with the schools, it'll be in the context of what do we think is the appropriate amount for the tier 2 capital article that we bring to town meeting every year, and both for the CPS, which is typically the 900,000, and for the high school. So we will continue this conversation in February, and I'm glad you're aware of it.
Any further discussion?
Tracy, am I understand that you feel like you folks have answered the question that the select board has asked with this submission? Or are you going to be giving them more information later on?
I guess we're looking for a little bit more clarity on what else they're looking for. So I think that, we're willing to meet with them, but I guess we've had a lot of things shift this year. There was a capital planning task force. We've had a lot of shifts from that process, and so I think we all need clarity. I think the select board, the school committee, finance committee, I think, clearly there's a lot of differences in opinions as to what's tier 1, what's tier 2, what's tier 3, and it keeps kind of moving around. So I think we need clarity. But we felt as though we answered the questions in the memo.
As a practical matter, I think what matters to us is what gets funded out of the current year's tax income and what gets capitalized, paid for with borrowed funds. And I think there are some items in the tier 1 requests that are capitalizable. In other words, they have use beyond a certain given year.
There's some vehicles and so forth, or
Yeah,
things like that.
right. If you're putting a new roof on a building, or you're doing something of that sort. But if it's truly an expense, or it is to
Well, there's some
study something
contingency, right,
that
yeah.
doesn't have any ongoing value, it needs to be expensed, and that just means whether we call it this or we call it the operating budget, we have to consider it under the guidelines.
I think it's all spending, so
It's all
that's how I
spending.
look at it.
It's all spending subject to
spending,
guidelines, yeah.
And there's like $100,000 in contingency,
Mm-hmm.
which, you can't capitalize that. That's just, it's good reason to have it.
Yeah,
But to me, that's operating expense. It doesn't go into capital. But they have, in their defense, they have traditionally put it there. So there is a classification issue that I think Tracy is mentioning. So it isn't so straightforward, because they do have some precedent for some of the things that they did.
Well, whether there's precedent or not, I just think from a clarity perspective, given the purpose of the guidelines being sustainability of our expenditures, we need to look at the totality of our expenditure. That's all.
Yeah.
My own take is there's no action necessary by the Finance Committee at this time. We were CC'd on an exchange between the Select Board and the School Committee, and sounds like they have a plan to follow up. We'll stay tuned. Okay. That is the end of our agenda, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned, 9:50.